Yeah, I'll start at 7. Everybody's here, so a quorum is here, so. And we have 7 attendees. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Evening, Mike.
She said she was away.
Yeah, I think she was on a cruise or something.
Right.
I think you're right. And she said she wouldn't be able to attend. I don't understand. They have Wi-Fi on a cruise ship.
I think she's gone to South America.
They still got Wi-Fi in South America. All right. Is PAT ready yet? Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Peabody Conservation Commission meeting tonight, Wednesday, February 8th. Peabody Conservation Commission hearings will be held remotely until March 31st, 2023. The remote participation is allowed in accordance with Section 20 of Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2021, signed into law by Governor Baker on February 12, 2022, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law C-30A, Section 18, as extended by Section 20 of Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. Individuals may participate remotely in a meeting via a remote participation platform called Zoom. Attending tonight is Vice Chairman Michael Rizzo, Secretary Michael Vivaldi, Commissioner Arthur Athis, Commissioner Bruce Comack, and Commissioner Rita Cavicchio, and myself, Stuart Lazaris. With that, we begin. First on the agenda is notice of intent. There's a continued public hearing on a notice of intent submitted by Hayes Engineering, Inc., Anthony Capicelli for Saitini Residences, LLC, Arthur Pimentel. The proposed work is the construction of a multifamily residential building with associated driveways, parking, access, and utilities within a buffer to BVD and IVW. Property is known as 190R Newberry Street, map 35, lot 338A in Peabody, Mass. We got a request. I'm sorry, the information we were supposed to get arrived finally today. So we have nobody's had a chance to look at it, including Lucia. I'd like to get a motion to continue.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second that.
All right. Lucia, do you want to do a roll call?
Yep, I just promoted Jack Kilty. He has his hand raised.
I only wanted to be involved, but if we've already moved the continuance, I'm fine.
We didn't get any information until today, Jack.
No, I said, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're moving it to continue.
Yes.
Roll call, please, Lucy.
Yep. Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes.
Secretary Vivaldi,
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Comac,
Yes.
and Commissioner Cavicchio.
Yes.
All right, that passes 6-0 unanimously. And just, I'm gonna have to mute you guys because there's already feedback, so I apologize.
Okay. Item 2, continued public hearing on a notice of intent submitted by GZA Geoenvironmental Inc., Don Nitze, for Emmanuel and Rose Papanikolaou, owners, and JD Raymond Transport Inc., Will Boyle applicant, to propose work as the construction of a stormwater infiltration basin partially within the buffer zone to a wetland resource. The property is known as 25 Farm Ave, map 69, lot 006 and 007 in Peabody, Mass. The applicant has requested a continuance for more time to respond to peer reviews and abutters issues. Can I get a motion to continue?
So moved.
Second,
A second.
roll call.
Roll call, Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes.
Secretary Vivaldi,
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Comac,
Yes.
and Commissioner Cavicchio.
Yes.
All right, the item is continued unanimously till March 8th.
I'm sorry, say it again.
The item's continued
And what else did you say?
unanimously until
Oh,
March 8th.
unanimously, okay, thank you. Item 3, enforcement orders. A continued enforcement order issued to the Salem Country Club for the following activities: removal of living trees / grinding, rubbing stumps in buffer zones and in close proximity to jurisdictional resource areas, and depositing wood chips in buffer zones and along local riverfront woods. The property address is known as 133 Forest Street, Peabody, Mass. A lot has happened recently. Lucia and I met with the club with also Mike DeRosa, and we went through each area, anticipated tree plantings and shrubs. Mike has since put together a presentation. Do you want to do it, Mike? Mike DeRosa?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you
Sorry,
want to
Stuart.
do you want to put on the presentation you did?
Yeah, I can share my screen and then just run through sort of talking points. We can bring people up to speed with what has happened. I guess that makes sense.
That's what I would like to do.
Then I'm on. I think someone has to allow me to share.
Bear with me. After this update, the Zoom's all weird. You can't share yet?
No, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on, bear with me. I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. Now you should be able to.
Yes, now I can.
It wasn't the update. It's just me.
No, it's
There you go.
that was probably the update, no question. So everyone can see my screen. I can blow it up a little bit more. Is that legible to everybody, or yes, I'm seeing some nods.
Yeah.
So this is just an outline I did to go through more to organize my thoughts and figure out where we are with things. It may not be totally inclusive of everything that's been discussed, but I think it gets the majority of it. So as Stuart said, we met with the country club's representatives, Barry Fogel, and their representative from Save a Tree, who's done the restoration plan. On January 26th, we met with Lucia as well was there, and Ben Staples from our team was there. We met at City Hall in the lower conference room. The outcome of that was that we modified and discussed the tree list with them, and we agreed with the final list, which they had subsequently updated and sent to the commission. I have it also at the end of this. We discussed moving some items from the enforcement order to the pending maintenance plan, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We discussed improving the quality of the planting plans because they were pretty sparse in their detail. And we scheduled a meeting for myself to meet on the course with Bill Rocco to discuss the fairway treatment of the intermittent streams and the cutting of the stumps and treatment of some of the stumps, well, a specific stump on the 16th fairway, but also sort of the filling. Some of the stumps had been ground already, I guess over a year ago, and that those areas were to be filled with loam and seeded and blended into the surrounding contours. So we met on site. We reviewed the cutting of the stump on the 16th and the filling of previously ground stumps, loam and seed, and appropriate seed mix. I suggested that they use something which we like to use for erosion and naturalized areas, which is a red fescue, switchgrass, and little blue stem mix. Bill didn't have any issues with that. Those species are all on the course already, so it would be consistent with their aesthetic. We also discussed in detail the hop treatment area over by the second, by the irrigation pond. Bill did a summary and sent it to the commission, which I edited and sent back. And I think Lucia sent it back to the country club's team today. We also discussed locations for pollinator habitat while we were out there, including the Japanese hops area at the second tee, second green. We also talked about grubbing the third hole and the 14th for tree plantings, and I agreed that that would be a good strategy. There's a lot of invasive stuff coming up there that needs to be gotten rid of. We also discussed updating the planting plans as per I gave Mr. Rocco some representative samples of what a planting plan should have on it, and some examples to illustrate that for their consultants. We discussed the club's desire to move the stream maintenance and mowing sequence for fairways and roughs as part of the larger maintenance plan for the course. And then we talked about marking the no disturbance zones on the 5th, 8th, and 16th. And Bill had some good ideas there, but I think the commission should review that and work with the club on that directly. And then I don't know if you want me to go through all my comments back to Bill on the on his email regarding the Japanese hops management, or has the commission seen that? I don't know if we want to belabor it, but
I would find it helpful to quickly go through it to make sure if the club is responding.
I think they just got it today, so I don't know if they've had a minute to look at it, but
Through the chair, I did look at it. I looked at the comments, and then I looked at the responses from Salem Country Club, and some of them seemed pretty clear cut, but there were others that maybe we just need to discuss because they were not in support of our recommendations and said they wouldn't make those changes. There was a few items on that.
Have they responded to that already?
Well, if I'm looking at the right document, there was with your comments 1 through whatever they were, 20 or something like that, and there was your comment, and then Salem Country Club's response to those comments, and many of them were in the affirmative, but others weren't as clear, and it seemed that maybe they didn't address the comment as we would accept, we wanted them to. And in a couple of cases, I think they said they weren't going to entertain that request.
I think that was another document.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike. So let me go through.
Yeah, can you continue and just do the summary of compliance with the amended EO?
Yeah,
Please.
I think let's go to that.
All right.
So that's what happened. We had the meeting on the 26th, and then on the 27th, Bill and I met and went through the site. So what I also did was I wanted to bring everything back to the EO because the amended enforcement order, because that's really what the commission is asking the club to respond to and to comply with. So I went through each of the amendments, which, excuse me, which are the amended details that was in the October 14th amendment. So Section BA requires plantings in canopy, shrub, and herbaceous layers for all the restoration areas. So we've only have seen a list and reviewed a list of trees, and there's no understory plantings except for the area by the second green by the irrigation pond. There's no understory plant list at this time to review for the other restoration areas. So the trees we agreed to on the 26th, and Mr. Rocco has, I believe, Chairman Lazarus has authorized them to do the order for the trees. But there's no understory plantings proposed at this time that we've seen from the club. They've just provided tree plantings, not the other 2 layers. So that needs to be discussed. Section BB requires the establishment of 10-foot wide vegetated buffer strip along the intermittent streams with signage marking the no disturbance zone. The club would like to move this to the pending maintenance plan. Commission needs to decide if that is appropriate and amend the enforcement order again to reflect that change if that's what they decide. We recommend establishing a date certain for the maintenance plan if the commission goes that route, so that it's not just a flexible date. It's something that is a hard date that needs to be met in that regard. Section BC requires the establishment of posting a 10-foot wide no disturbance zone along some of the wooded areas to be determined by the commission. And I think Lucia is the one and I think it's on the 14th and 15th fairways. There might be some other areas, Lucia, that you were interested in getting monumented, but I couldn't remember when I wrote this. But those have yet to be determined. We have the general area, but I think the commission needs to be specific about where they want these markings done. Section BD requires the restoration of the abandoned irrigation pond. The club would like to hold this for future restoration opportunity. The commission needs to decide if that is appropriate and amend the EO to reflect that change. This is that sort of constructed irrigation pond that was sort of half full. It's got the liner through it that had apparently failed. So they would like to hold on to that for future opportunities for restoration on the course. Section BE requires the establishment of a pollinator habitat within turf areas that are out of play and within buffer zones to wetland resource areas. So at this point in time, there's 2 areas that have been identified, and Mr. Rocco and I looked at those on the 27th. The Japanese hop area makes perfect sense to me. It's within buffer zone, and it's also an area that's going to be disturbed and will provide a perfect area for pollinator habitat. And then along the 14th fairway, that's an area that's proposed to be planted with trees as well, but it's a nice south-facing slope. It would be a perfect spot for pollinator areas. To that point, there's no planting plan or list that has been provided to date for either site. We'll need to assess those things for appropriateness. And then a maintenance plan and management of the area should also be included. So are they going to be cutting them once a year, once every couple of years? We need to know that. We want to maintain, obviously, a meadow habitat, not an area that's going to be reinvaded with invasives. Commission needs to decide if 2 areas are adequate to meet the intent of the amended enforcement order, and if additional sites should be considered and located and appropriate detail provided. Section BF requires that the canopy plantings restore the function and value of the lost canopy within 10 years. We have agreed to the amended plant list based on our discussions with the group on the 26th. Club has agreed to at least 2-inch caliber tree stock, which should meet the goal of meeting the 10-year replacement threshold. The canopy has agreed to geolocate the locations of the trees on an appropriately scaled plan and document the installation locations for review by the commission to establish success of the plantings. And that's going to be important, I think, because we're asking for a 5-year monitoring plan, or the commission's asking for a 5-year monitoring plan. It's going to be important to know where those trees are. I think we should also have them individually tagged for long term to be able to look at success over that 5-year period. Section BG requires the provision of protections and care of all planted material. The restoration plan and schedule provided by Stephen Roberti at Save a Tree included an attachment to the letter from Keegan Werlin. That's the letter I think you're referring to earlier, Mike. Rizzo.
Yeah.
Addresses care of the planted material. Basically, they reference standard care. The amended tree list was revised and accepted at the meeting we talked about. Section C requires of the amended enforcement order requires all plantings to be native Massachusetts. It's generally the case, and I didn't look at the list before tonight, but I think there might be a couple that are not necessarily native, but we've approved them as well anyway. Section D requires removal of wood chips. They've done that, and that's been inspected by members of the commission. And myself. Requires the timeline for installation of plantings to be completed on or before June 30th of this year. The club suggests that the timing of the installation of plantings will depend on the availability of plant material, and I would agree with that. The commission should consider the phasing of the plantings and consider amending the enforcement order to allow for multiple phase installation based on the plant availability that the club's been able to secure for the spring planting, and maybe the club can comment on that tonight if they've actually made that order and what they've been able to achieve. I attached my comments for the Japanese hops treatment. I've attached the amended EO without the attachments, just to save space, and then the revised tree list and the shrubs for the pond bank on the second hole only. So that was a lot, and it was really boring, but that's kind of where we are. I think to bumper sticker that, we've We've come up with an agreed upon tree list. We've come up with an agreed upon shoreline planting on the irrigation pond. And then we still have more to discuss.
All right. I think this is great. And it was all, like I said in my email, everything was done in one new document, so it's all in one place. Do we want to go through the items again that are missing and get the club's comments on them at this point? I guess that's a resounding yes. We have the tree list, and the question is there a pending maintenance plan, and when do we get it? This is a Bill Rocco question.
I know they refer to a maintenance plan and they refer to another larger maintenance plan. So I'm a little confused as to, when we're going to see these maintenance plans and the larger one. And are we going to,
I agree.
Mr. Chairman?
Is Bill Rocco's here, isn't he?
I'm here
Yes.
too, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Hi, Bill. Can you supply us with a date? Hi, Barry. Can you supply us with a date when you think the maintenance plan would be ready to look at?
Sure. In the meeting on the 26th, we talked about that, and the folks who were present suggested that the long-term, the plan, the program for standard course management and maintenance should be presented in a full-blown notice of intent. We had discussed whether it should be a request for determination or an NOI, and the request was made that it be done as an NOI. So the course and I have talked, and in order to do that, we think that our reasonable objective is going to be to get you an NOI on that filed in April for the May meeting. We probably are going to bring in another wetland scientist who is familiar with golf course management plans, and we might sort of double at that point, confirm the wetland boundary flagging and include that as an updated delineation, because as the commission knows, if a delineation is approved in an order of conditions, then it's valid for the work proposed. So we want to get that done, and we want to get a pretty robust management plan for all the activities that the course undertakes and wants to undertake on a regular basis. So we think that to get a full good NOI for you to review for what's been called a maintenance plan would be for the April filing for your May meeting. As far as the couple of things that Mike.
Excuse me, will the maintenance plan include treatments of invasives like Japanese hops?
Well, the Japanese hops plan has been filed. We got the comments today that Mike DeRosa's group put together, and actually that all of those comments were excellent, and the club didn't have any dispute with any of those. So the plan is to implement the hops plan with those comments and recommendations. For example, one of the things that Mike's group recommended was to put some landscaping fabric in the hole where the material would be placed, and then to cover it with that. That was a good idea. He suggested treating that material before it's covered, treating it with an organic herbicide, and we want to do that. So all of that input was very helpful. We saw that today, but had a chance to look at it and didn't have anything that we wanted to
Will all that be included in the NOI as attachments?
Well, the hops plan was required as part of the amended NOI, and we actually are prepared to implement that now in the winter.
Okay, all right.
So that would be
Because
part
there was something in the plan that said that if future hops go up, there was a maintenance plan to take care of those.
Well, it was really more the following. I think in our filing in November, what we said was, once there's a long-term management program for the course, and as restored areas recover, the club can undertake a periodic inspection for invasive species. And if there are invasive plants starting to show up in some areas, they can control them and use the standard. I think the NOI would have in the long-term plan, would have sort of what you're used to seeing as a standard invasives management plan.
Okay.
Hand pulling or mechanical before any kind of chemical treatment. So that the sort of call it broad brush invasives management would be in the NOI for long-term.
Good.
The other pieces that would be in the NOI for long-term would be to work through creating any no disturb zones along any areas. And as we've indicated in previous submittals, the way we understand your ordinance, sort of it's part of the commission's program to sort of establish no disturb zones through the approval of a project. And so we think that the best forum for sort of establishing any kind of no disturb areas and monumentation of areas that would be off limits or subject to, as Mike just said, special management to maintain the pollinator species. We think that also would be best addressed and written up in detail and reviewed as part of the notice of intent for long-term course management. And then the final sort of, I'll call it we've already talked before about sort of anything having to do with that lined pond being sort of included in that notice of intent.
Yeah.
But the final thing that we think is important is, we think we've given the commission appropriate figures depicting where the replanting is proposed. And certainly as we looked at those figures the 26th with Mike DeRosa and Ben Staples there, and our arborist from Save a Tree, we sort of selected species that Ben Staples thought were more appropriate. With the authorization or direction we got from the chairman, Bill actually was able to place an order with a nursery, and 181 trees have been committed for delivery for planting in the spring. So that was a real good piece of those. One of the things that the nursery told us, and Ben is on this call, so we wanted to raise this, Mike, and Mr. Chairman and members. The nursery said that the birches that were, not gray birch, Bill, it was
Yellow and black.
Yellow and black birch, that they actually don't typically come in 2-inch caliper plants, but they come in, is the word bundles, or sort of a grouping of sprouts larger than that, but so they get planted in groupings. And so we wanted to just say that rather than ordering them, because they weren't sort of per se 2-inch caliper, but together they add up, and we wanted to run it by you tonight and find out if with Ben's input, if that would be considered appropriate for those species that Ben had identified as being preferable to other birches that we had identified. So, but 181, the rest of them were included. And then as far as the words that Mike used were that the plans were sparse in detail. We had indicated previously that we would GPS and geolocate the trees when they're planted. And what we would do then, and our recommendation would be that you allow us to develop those higher level plans or figures, if you will. And in doing that, we'll know where the trees are, and therefore we'll know where we can put shrubs and understory. We didn't want to design these plans and clutter them with other plant images without knowing where the trees were going to go. But we think once the trees are planted and we know where they are and we've located them, we can give you a plan that shows and have figured out in the meantime what shrub species are preferable. But rather than doing them ahead of time, we thought it would be best to incorporate that into giving you the, I think the word we used before was as built, or really it's as planted for the trees. So that's sort of the, on top of the plan that we submitted in November and with the input that came back to us from Mike's group, and then we responded to that. And then the meeting we had, we think we've got a plan that addresses the tree planting and a program that we can put together that addresses the other parts of that, either in adding the understory and shrubs in the as-built of the trees, and then putting the other items, if you will, into the NOI for long-term course management. And again, I guess I keep thinking of one more thing, with Mike's input from the site visit with Bill, and with the direction from the meeting we had, there is some work that would go on now, both for the grinding of some stumps that were left untouched after the cease and desist, using that seed mix that Mike mentioned in his comments, and taking care of that Japanese hops area. Mike called it next to the second tee. It's actually on the other side of the pond from that tee, so it's really south of the 13th green, but it is north of both the pond and the second tee. I should add an additional point, which is that in the materials we submitted last week were planting figures for the wetland area on 8, where 12 trees would go. 4 separate species, 3 trees each, that were discussed with the group at the 26th. And then the distribution of the 100 shrubs on the pond bank on 2.
When you do the geolocating of the trees, can you tag them and with both the name of the tree and the geolocation?
Correct.
Okay.
And we'll also geolocate, should add, the sprouts that we find on any stumps that are in
That's
those
fine.
areas where Ben had recommended coppicing them to try to encourage the largest sprout.
Right.
So they regrow as well on top of the 233 trees being planted, but we will geolocate those as well as we find them.
I think it's important for us lay people not only to know where the tree is, but what it's called.
Yeah. Through the chair, Stu,
Go ahead.
unfortunately, I was not able to attend that meeting. I was in jury duty and the case went 3 days, so I apologize for not being able to be there. So I have no idea what you guys saw or was shown at that meeting about a plan of where these trees are going. So I'm in the dark, and I apologize for that, but I keep going back to feeling that we need a plan that shows where the trees are going. And
We emailed that in last week, and I hope that Lucia circulated that to the members. I'm happy to share my screen and show you those, but yeah, here, Mike's got them here too, but those were all.
it was just two drawings. Wasn't that just 2 drawings?
Well, I thought she would have also circulated the final planting for the buffer zones, because we had changed the species according to Ben Staples' recommendations. So those were submitted last week as well. I'm hoping that those got circulated, but we can certainly show those now as well.
I'd like
Yes,
to
through
see
the
it.
chair, they are definitely 100% on the OneDrive. They're labeled 2/1/23 new plans, restoration plans. They are 100% on the OneDrive.
Hold on. Say that again. 2/1/20, 2/1/23 restoration plan.
Mike, is that you sharing your screen, Mike DeRosa?
Sorry, yes.
Can you call up since you're already sharing, can you call up also those A through L figures? Do you
Well,
have
for
those?
some reason, they didn't load. I've only got the 8th and the 2nd.
I can share
Yeah, I can stop sharing, yeah.
if Lucia will allow me to share, I can call those up.
Oops, what happened to it?
And while they're loading here. Okay. Is that me sharing or someone else?
It's you sharing. I
Okay.
think it's Barry sharing.
Yeah, they're loading slowly.
Oh, a lot of data.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So it's that they're the same figures that members would have seen previously, but the species were revised to reflect the input from Ben Staples. And so this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, 1 and J2 and K and L. So these are the same polygons in the same locations, but the only difference was that we changed the list to include species that, like, for example, there were some dogwoods and some, I think, gray birch that Ben thought would be inappropriate. And so we substituted more hornbeam and sort of switched out probably 2 or 3, Mike and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been 2 or 3 species, and upped the numbers of more of the hickory and swapped in some of the birch species that Ben thought were more appropriate. So for Mr. Rizzo's question, nothing changed in terms of the polygons, the locations, and the number of trees. It was just the species that were modified in some places. And then we added, what we filed was what Mike was showing was the wetland on. So for example, this is the image for the buffer zone on 8, and then the new image includes where my cursor's moving. We put the 12, and there's a sort of a separate figure that shows where or what the species are in the wetland. And then there's that other figure, Mike, maybe I'll stop sharing and you want to pull that one back up, that shows the distribution of shrubs on the pond bank on 2. So that's all really, Mr. Rizzo, that changed was a couple of species got swapped out at Mr. Staples' recommendation. And our arborist, Tom Miles, was there, and they did their arborist thing and talked about different species, identified, kind of kicked out a bunch of what's called cedars, but actually are arborvitae. And so we didn't want those. They were less cedar than arborvitae. I mean, then they were more arborvitae than cedar. So we took out some references of certain cedar species that are truly arborvitae. So that's how that went down, and that's what was submitted a week ago, and you should have available.
Okay.
Anything else?
Not from us at the club. I mean, that's so I think sort of the ask, if you will, on our end is that if the commission will, I would, sort of following on the lead of Mike DeRosa's comments, is that if you would sort of move and approve another amendment to the enforcement order that sort of authorizes the work that we've talked about and presented as far as the tree planting and the Japanese hops, and then sort of indicate that in some fashion that acknowledge that a notice of intent will be filed with the objective to be to file it in April for your May meeting. Certainly no later than May for your June meeting, but our goal would be to do it for the April filing. And then we can move ahead as the trees arrive in late March and start planting.
let me see if I can rephrase. So you need us to approve the ordering of the plant and of all the trees you're ordering and working on the Japanese hops. And I guess I don't know what else you're doing.
Not just the ordering of the trees, I would say implementing the tree planting according to those plans we've submitted, right? So you're sort of
Okay.
referencing that. And then the other sort of, I'll call it ground disturbance restoration, is the stuff that Mike talked about with Bill Rocco, which is grinding some stumps, taking the chips off site and filling that and sort of seeding it. But as far as anything else that was in the amended enforcement order, we would request that get put into a requirement to include that in a notice of intent for long-term course management.
Okay, so what's the need for a notice of intent? We're under an enforcement order, so what's the need for a notice of intent relative to the restoration plan?
Not for that. Yeah, no, when Mike DeRosa came on board, and I think we may even have talked about it before he did, but we had sort of said the goal of this, one of the goals, was that you folks at the commission wanted to know what the course was doing in these buffer zone areas and to have some kind of a program that, rather than the club having to come back and tell you about what they might be doing in an area for the first time, is to try to give you an idea of what the course considers to be sort of regular golf course maintenance, where they mow, because you have buffer zones everywhere from these streams, right? So we're trying to establish through this notice of intent, the areas of the course where you folks and Lucia know that's mowing 150 feet from a ditch, let's say. And so you sign off on certain activities that just do them. In other areas, you might say, give them 48 hours notice to the commission through the agent. In other areas, you might say, don't do that until you've come to a meeting and shown us how you're going to do it. It's sort of a hierarchy of knowing what the course is doing in the world of what I might call, or what we might call, sort of annual, regular, periodic maintenance of the course. And we can create some no disturb areas. We can create areas that are monumented as being retained as pollinator habitat, and not have this happen again, if you will, of you not knowing what the course is doing in these areas that are routinely managed, but happen to be in the wide-ranging buffer zones you have jurisdiction over. So it's not meant to be a notice of intent for an order to go with this enforcement stuff. It's meant to be future facing, right?
Well, couldn't that be served with the same way with an operation and maintenance plan that would identify all the things you just said in a plan and not be tied to a notice of intent?
I would love not to have to file a notice of intent, but it's, there's three ways to skin a cat. One is to just give you an O&M plan, but it never gets recorded.
An O&M plan, it can be in perpetuity and it could be revisited.
But how would you sort of create, how would you establish that as being, I'll call it binding? An order of conditions is recorded, you get a certificate of compliance that has some conditions. We could do, I thought, an RDA with a determination of applicability that might do the same thing. We're open to whatever the commission thinks is the best way to do it. But at the meeting on the 26th, when Lucia and Mike DeRosa and the chairman were there, we left the meeting with, we the commission representatives think it should be a notice of intent. But,
I think, and maybe you know more than I do, I was always under the assumption that when work under a notice of intent becomes harder to enforce or manage, is you're not tied to certain things. The enforcement orders are much more important in terms of ensuring that we get a proper plan the way we all agree it's going to be built. And notice of intent is tied usually with a notice of conditions, and those have time limits. And I'm just wondering if that's, I'm not saying no, I'm wondering if that's
Yeah.
the appropriate way of doing it, or should it be done as, because an operation and maintenance plan, that can be in perpetuity, that's tied to the enforcement order or tied to the restoration plan, which is part of the enforcement order, so that and not a notice of intent as a new project.
I understand what you're saying, and I think others might, but my opinion is that I would like to see the golf courses, I'll call it routine management program, not be linked to an enforcement action. I'd rather see it be part of a standard filing that you folks approve. Remember, my own opinion is that your ordinance actually says that no disturb zones can be established during a review of an application. So I think that's the right place for the NDZ stuff to be created. But then you can have certificate of compliance that has conditions, it's recorded. So if Bill Rocco moves on to Pebble Beach and, you know, Lucia's somewhere else in 5 years or 10 years or 20, but that it's something that it may get revisited, but new players can see it, it's recorded, and the course and the public can see it on record. While it might be more process, I think I didn't have a problem with the folks at the meeting saying an NOI might be the best way to do it.
If I could ask, what do you think, Michael?
So let me respond to that. I think I do believe the NOI is the process to go through for that, and we have done that many times in many towns for the same outcome. And what we generally do is we include an operation and maintenance plan as an appendix to an exhibit to the NOI, which is then becomes the ongoing the condition that's in perpetuity. So, and the commission can always issue an enforcement order. So if things are not being complied with under the management plan. And I'm sure that management plan is going to be, it's going to filing the NOI is going to give the commission an opportunity to review it. It's going to give the commission an opportunity to say, look, for monitoring, we want to have, at least an annual inspection, that kind of thing, to be as part of that and as part of the long-term operation and maintenance plan. So I think that's the correct format to start with. And then if things don't go well, then and the commission's not getting what they want, they can always issue.
I don't mind piling onto that, Mr. Rizzo, is that an O&M plan can be a component of the NOI, and there can be a condition in a certificate of compliance that would say every 3 years or every 5 years, provide the commission with an updated O&M plan and for, review and comment, that kind of thing. So you can build in sort of a repeated filing of an O&M plan, but it's referenced and created through the order of conditions.
I think we should, as this moves forward and we come up with a plan and this is completed, I think we should meet annually. I think the Conservation Commission should meet with Salem Country Club every year, whatever time of the year is the best, to determine what the plan is for that year and and there's no surprises. And depending on what might be happening in that year, maybe it require more meetings, but I think that at least at a minimum, we should get an update what the plan from the country club is each year.
I think Bill and I have talked about that. I should note, by the way, there's a new gentleman who's come in, has now taken on the role of the general manager of the club. His name is Bill Shaw. And he and I and Bill Rocco talked about this, and he very much understands that kind of idea of wanting to have periodic communication with the commission, what's going to be happening. For example, if there's going to be, some resurfacing of a tee box to flatten it, and it happens to be within a buffer zone, you want to know how's that going to be done? Where will erosion controls be put? So if Bill Shaw and Bill Rocco have something coming up in 2027 that's going to involve the 4th tee and the 8th green or something, you'll have a chance or some grouping or at a meeting, you'll talk it through and hear about it. I think,
So you're in
no
agreement.
question that that's a great idea. And I think since a year ago, we've been hoping to reach this point of getting to where the commission would understand that the club wants to be in that kind of a relationship with the commission, where you know what they're expecting to do in the next period of time and can have some input on that.
Thank you.
Through the chair,
Go ahead.
through the chair.
ahead.
I know we're talking about the restoration plan. I don't think it should be under for this particular work that needs to be done that we've identified should be under a separate notice of intent and included in the general maintenance plan. But putting that aside, I'm looking at the 2/1/23 restoration plans and documents, and one of the files is a rather larger file. It has like 14 images in it. I don't know if that's maybe Mike DeRosa, do you have that to put on the screen? Because I'm looking at it.
Those were the ones I shared. I'm happy to reshare.
Yeah, reshare, that'd be great.
The 2/1/23,
Yep, let me open those up again.
the second, the larger file. You can go back to the first image.
I will.
These are all
Is
going to
that
be,
the one, Mr. Athos?
that one right there.
Yeah,
So all your planting is only going to occur in those little snatches of yellow. Is
Yes.
that
they're not little, but yes.
Well, I
in the
mean-
area- in the yellow areas.
so? But we're talking about a canopy loss. That was all that was lost, was just those little snatches.
These polygons are reflective of areas where trees were cut in buffer zone areas, and that corresponded as best as we could determine with the figures that were in the DeRosa report as having been areas where canopy loss occurred. We found, as stated in the narrative that we submitted, that in some instances, the canopy loss figures actually seem to capture shadows of trees rather than the actual planting of tree areas. So when we presented it in writing and then talked about it at the meeting, my understanding, I don't want to speak for Mike DeRosa, but I think he concurs that these are appropriate areas to be for where the canopy would be restored, where trees were cut.
And Mr. DeRosa, you're in agreement with that, looking at this?
In large part, yeah, and substantial support of this. They're putting in 200 and I think there's some additional trees, Barry, that need to be included that weren't in the initial list to get
No,
up
we
to
actually got the
33.
we actually got the 233, including the 12 in the
Okay.
Woodland on 8. So we're up to the number.
All right, so that's good. So they're providing the number, the 233 number, and
Are the
and
areas?
they're hitting the big areas that there was big canopy loss. So
Okay,
we're okay with that.
all right.
I still have issues with the understory and the herbaceous layers not being included. I heard Barry say earlier that they're thinking of waiting to get the trees in and then somehow come back to the commission, I guess, under the enforcement order. Barry, is that your thought with a understory planting plan at that
Yeah, I
time?
think my thought was that if there's an amendment to the enforcement order to reflect what we're discussing, that it would require us to do it. I'm not just saying we might, I'm saying the club will. But the best way for the club to present that is after the trees have been geolocated and we know where shrubs and understory can go.
Yeah.
So can I ask, Lucia, could you weigh in on this in terms of, it seems to me that there are probably a lot of trees that were within the wetlands jurisdiction that were cut that are not in these particular locations. And I know they're satisfying the requirement of the 233 trees, but I'm not, it just seems to be just intermittent areas rather than the whole area that was affected. So, Lucia, you there?
Yep. So I believe all those yellow areas are the areas that were altered, except the bank, obviously the pond bank is not shown
Okay,
That's gonna be understory, I'm assuming.
all right.
No, that
So-
pond bank is gonna be the shrubs that we've presented here. But Mr. Athis, if you recall, the figure that was presented a while ago might have been April, May, or June, where Weston and Sampson had put the red dots for where each tree was GPS
Right,
located.
right.
These polygons were drawn to cover those. So these actually are the same polygons that correspond to the areas from that figure. We didn't move them.
So
Okay.
is there a reason that the area adjacent to the second tee, is that the one we're talking about?
Yes,
The one that was all completely cleared and that you're gonna replant that area?
I'll show you that figure.
Is that in one of these?
No, that's, so the 14 are the buffer zone, and I'm about to share, let's see, share screen. So this plan was included in the group that just got submitted to you last week. So this is the second tee here. And this is the pond, irrigation pond, and where the vegetation was removed and the sod was placed is on this section of the bank. So these are, each of those dots was reflective of 5 different species of shrub that would be planted 5 feet on center. So you can imagine that a shrub grows to fill an area of 25 square feet. So this intention is to plant these on that bank. So that's that area.
So is that one of the drawings that are in that group?
No, this is a new drawing this week because the grouping of 14 that Mr. Athis referred to are just the buffer zone areas where 221 trees would go. There's another drawing of the 8th. Let me show you that one. And so the final drawing was this one coming up.
I'm trying to follow you with my own drawings from
Yeah.
the OneDrive, because for some reason I can't get your plan to enlarge and fill my screen. It's a little square, so I can't see it.
Do you see on your screen where you see all the speakers? There's a little like 3-bar thing in between the map and the people.
And just
If you
Here's Mike
slide that,
DeRosa here. Yeah, I just want to say, Barry, that there are some trees proposed in that area. There's some hickory and some other things. So it's not just shrubs going in there. There's some trees. They're going further down, but not right on the shoreline. But there are some trees going in.
well, yeah, to be clear,
And so why aren't those on there then?
so just to be clear, so this area C right here, so this map and the ones that follow, this will come up, figure C. So this is that second T. So there are trees being planted farther northwest on the bank. And then the shrubs are going back around the corner here. So this is buffer zone to the pond where trees are going. That's included in this set of figures as C. So that set of 14, A through L, are buffer zone areas. Then there's a figure, a 15th figure, if you will, for the wetland on 8, where 12 trees are going, that brings the total to 233. And then there's the figure I had just showed you of the
And we've agreed to all of that. And I just I've been texting Ben back and forth, and he agrees that it's okay to substitute the clustered birch trees. So that's fine with him.
oh, good.
So that's okay to add to your order list as
Are those
well.
like river birch? Usually the river birch come in clumps. So is that
A lot of the birch, yeah, a lot of the birches come in that sort of growth form.
This is yellow and black birch.
Yep.
So this figure is the last one. I'll share it. This is identified as BVW on hole 8, if you can see that now. And so what we did with that figure was, while this is the area of the buffer zone that's one of the 14 figures, this was a separately created figure, same polygon, but showing where the 12 trees in the wetland on 8, the BVW line is this line. And so inside the BVW line, this is where trees would, subject, of course, to, and that's another point that was discussed, is that at the meeting on the 26th, we did discuss that the best way for this to be planted would be for the holes to be dug in the dry season in the summer, and for these trees to be planted in the fall planting season, rather than going in there in the spring when it's wetter. Mike DeRosa, do you remember that aspect of that?
I do remember that. We did discuss that, and Ben and I are both okay with that.
So that's the set of figures, if you will. There's this BVW planting. There's the one that I showed you of the shrubs on the bank of 2. And then there are the other figures that are all buffer zone planting areas that were on the figure Mr. Athos asked to look at.
Any more questions? Anybody?
I had just 2 that I was addressed earlier, and I wasn't following Mike's letter. So I was looking at a different document relative to the comments from DER to Salem Country Club and Salem Country Club's response back. And 2 in particular, we had said that Mike DeRosa would be on site during this, and you said that you didn't want to pay him to be there. And I don't know how that was resolved. It's not what was in the original enforcement order.
Yeah, we talked about that. And actually, I think when we talked about it, Mike and Ben and us, we all talked that we thought it would be better to have our arborist, Tom Miles, there to oversee the planting of the trees and to make sure it was done following those ANSI standards. And so I think, to paraphrase what Mike said, better to have an arborist out there than a wetland scientist. So we thought, we think, we really appreciate the work that Mike's done, but we think that in implementing this plan, the obligation should be on the club to monitor it, to record it with photographs, GPS, geolocation, but to have our arborist certify that it's been done in accordance with those standards. And, the members of the commission and Lucia are welcome to come. You're going to get notice of when the trees are being planted. You can come observe. But we just thought that, it should be our team doing it. So that was what, and then we think it should be our arborist who sort of is designing these species selection and should have the eyes on the ground of what's being put in the ground.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Standard landscape contracts have a warranty period. But there's also going to be in wetland replacement enforcement orders generally have a 4-year, because they're normally not planting trees. They normally, a wetland replacement planting, they generally have you plant, I don't know,
In the winter.
130% of what they want to survive. And then there's monitoring during that period. And then they allow for so much to die. And if more than that dies, the plantings have to be replaced. Now, I've never seen a wetland planting, and I don't consider this all wetland planting, but a planting of this site. Who's going to monitor it? Who's going to guarantee replacement? It's a golf course. They can't water every tree every day. So there's some of it's not gonna make it. I just
think-
want to know, I want to know in writing that they're going to somehow, somewhere in some kind of program here that we're going to get some kind of, I don't know who does the monitoring.
Well, there were, Mr. Komack, the enforcement order had some timeframes in there for reports to the commission about the success of these plants. So I don't have it in front of me, but we were, we provided responses to that in terms of timing. We asked to push out the time for planting to include the fall planting season and then get you an annual report. And as I recall, it was like 5 years of reports. In the November 15th timeframe. So no, there would be annual reporting for.
I understand. That's all well and good that there's reporting.
Yeah.
Where's the mechanism that says, okay, 10 trees died. We have to replace, we're I don't know how many plant trees. There's 180 trees going in.
Well, there will be 233 going.
Okay,
in.
so 230 trees are going in. We're expecting a mortality of 90%. So, I mean, not mortality, but we're expecting 90% to live. So, there's 23 trees, we're going to allow that. And then or we're going to replace every tree for tree that dies. Some trees are not going to make it. I guarantee you that.
Well, it's your folks' call as to how you want.
And we want those trees to make it. And there's some dialogue in comment number 9 that speaks directly to that about new tree protection, trees being protected from watering in case there's a lack of rainfall, that they're properly watered, and also trees being protected from animals such as deer by wrapping the trees and those kind of things. And my question to you is, that's a comment, and then I think you responded in the affirmative that's, oh yeah, we'll do that. But my question is there any reason that this protection can't be provided by Salem Country Club? So all these trees that they need to be watered, and if it's a dry season, I don't want to hear like, well, our hoses didn't reach there. We couldn't do that. I want to know this now. I want to know that you folks can and will provide the necessary protection to satisfactorily water the trees and protect them from animal harm also.
Well, I think Bill can speak to that about in terms of his watering reaching them, but I think obviously the club wants the trees they plant to survive. So they're going to do it. Yeah. So yes, I mean, Bill, you can speak to, there aren't going to be any planted in areas you can't get at. I don't know. You tell me. You tell the commission.
I mean, our plan was going to be to put bags on them and we just fill them up as needed and keep them alive. I mean, yeah, we aren't in the business of keeping dead trees around the golf course. That would make it worse. It was probably always assumed that if we lost one, we'd replace one. So to have it in writing is no big deal. And in the wake of what Ben Staples said about the birches, we're going to go ahead and order those. I mean, I anticipate, unless there's unforeseen issues, we try to plant 221 trees this spring. So, I mean, we're going to try to get all these. And then the wetlands we'll have to do in the summer, and then we'll plant those 12. But, yeah, it was always kind of just, I guess, assumed that any tree that we lost, we replace, and
So,
it could be in writing.
Yeah, because I really want that to be, I want them all to be successful. I know on a lot of municipality projects, when you're on a downtown area and they're planting trees, they have these bags that are attached to the trees.
Yep, that's our plan. Yep.
Yeah, is that something that could possibly help in remote areas where maybe?
That's our plan for every one of them. We've already ordered them.
Okay.
Through the chair, one thing I just want, I know that the rest of them are 2-inch caliper minimum. That's generally 2.5. Birch trees, clump birches don't do them by caliper, but generally, a 2 to 2.5 inch caliper is a 12 to 14 foot birch, and that's what we should be getting.
Okay.
I don't want to see, I mean, they can bring them in and then, just because they tell you it's a clump, they can be tiny little whips. So, but generally a 12 to 14 foot is a 2.5 inch caliper. The clumps, that's what they generally are.
Okay. I think one of the other questions I had relative to some of the comments that Mike had made and some of the responses that came back from Salem Country Club. And it was with regard to the establishing a 10-foot natural vegetation along the intermittent streams that cross the course. And that was in our enforcement order, and your response to that was that you weren't going to do that. And I don't know, so to me, that's against the enforcement order. You're not complying with the enforcement order, and I wasn't sure how Mike, I wasn't at your meeting, how Mike, how that was resolved, that you folks decide which intermittent streams get proper 10-foot vegetated strips and which ones don't, when
Well,
science recommends that they should be. So I just don't know the answer, how that ended up.
well, we talked about it at the meeting, but also Mike DeRosa looked at those areas with Bill Rocco last week, and I'll let Mike speak for himself, but I think he was reminded in that site visit that there are no stream ditch areas that have closely mown fairway up to them. They have rough, and so this
So
is.
let me summarize that, Barry.
Okay, you go. Yeah.
I'm just trying to save time here. We're going
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
right?
Out there.
So can everybody see my picture?
Yes.
All right, so this is one of the streams. I believe this is on the third. Bill, you can correct me. This is the green here. There is thicker grass right adjacent to it. Over here is pretty much thicker grass as well. This is all rough. So this is going to act as a filter. It is thicker. It's only cut when needed. That's what Bill informed me when we were on the site. Trying to get a better, here's another shot. You can see that there is pretty much rough here, and this is in January. So in the summer, they do cut this, but it's as needed. It's not like they cut the greens or the fairways or the tees. So there is a fair amount of filtering that goes on here, and I'm okay with that, the way that is. The other areas, I'm going to try to, I didn't have a minute to put this together. This is the hops area. That's one of the pollinator garden areas, and this is the bank for the second, on the second. These are some of the tree roots that have been ground that they just want permission to fill in with loam and seed and get those sort of back to surrounding grade. I said that was a good idea. These are just potential problems for erosion if they don't take care of that. So, and this is on the first fairway. I think those should all be taken care of. This is an area, so this is an area that's well out of play, well out of the fairway. This is all rough. But this is an area that we could, the commission could have them do a little bit more naturalized planting off the edge of that. And Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but you didn't have a problem in this area. So that's one spot that could be done. We discussed whether or not we should, here, that's a good one, actually. So this is the cut fairway, and this is all rough. So this is thicker grass that does provide, in this particular spot, really good filtering, or better filtering. And it'd be nice to get a 10-foot, even more naturalized plantings here. So things like little blue stem, switchgrass, and red fescue. That's what I would recommend there. Wildflowers too would be great. I'm just going to go fast here. This is the 14th again. You can see where the fairway starts here. There's ample room here of the rough to filter that water already. So that's a good thing. It would be nice to get more, but it's doing what it needs to do. Another example of that, some more roots that need to get cleaned up.
Those
This
areas
is,
that you,
this is the other area, I think, Bill, where we want to do some wildflower pollinator garden stuff here.
Mike Rizzo, what did
Yeah.
you have?
so Bill, on those areas that Mike had described that would have the taller grass or the rough adjacent to the intermittent streams, do you restrict your fertilizers in those areas? Like I know in the fairways are all nice and green and stuff, but along these areas adjacent to the streams, do you have a reduced or a no fertilizer or something a little different in those areas?
We don't generally fertilize rough, so I guess you could say yeah. We generally fertilize rough once a year with like a it's called nature safe product. It's like an organic but yeah, it's like a once a year kind of thing. And in an area like that, we don't generally do like that close to a stream. So
Okay.
it's just wasteful.
Okay.
So you're suggesting, Barry, that the maintenance part of it be in an NOI or a separate document that we will start to see in March, April, and we can,
April.
okay. I don't know if we want to call it an NOI or just call it a maintenance plan, but
Well,
I
it's
guess-
gonna be an NOI. I mean, it's gotta be something. So we're gonna make it an NOI. It's gonna have someone's gonna come out this spring and reconfirm as much as they can the boundaries so that you have the ability to, because right now you're working off of a delineation that was submitted, but an enforcement order is not something that I'm familiar with as being sort of the mechanism for confirming a delineation. So we think that we want to get that locked in with the operation and maintenance plan and get an order of conditions. So, we did an order of conditions for the that pipe through the buffer to the pond for the irrigation water. So we have no problem doing an NOI for something this complex.
Well, the question I really wanted to ask was, in this document that you're proposing, NOI or maintenance plan, I'd like to see in there a periodic report. I don't know if it's once every 6 months, once a year, as well as what you suggested was a meeting between the Conservation Commission and the country club.
Yeah, well, that was Mr. Rizzo's idea, but we think it makes sense. So yes, no, that'll all be in there. I mean,
Okay.
Bill really
All right.
wants, Bill Shaw and Bill Rocco really want to get something in front of you that gives you an idea of the kinds of activities that are routinely undertaken, and then a mechanism for giving you notice of something. If there's, you have your commission policy on tree cutting, so if there turns out to be a dead tree that's some risk, but it's in a buffer zone, we want to have it known to you in this plan that Lucia
Good.
gets a call, that kind of thing. So,
Good.
yeah.
All right. Has anybody got anything else to add to this at this time? Because it sounds like until we see the rest of the plan, we have to continue this, correct?
I'm making a request that you move and vote to issue I'll call it a final enforcement order that directs the club to plant the trees in accordance with the figures that we submitted on the first. Number one. Number two, to implement the Japanese hops program. It'll still include other requirements for periodic reports to you on the progress of those trees, and to give you at the point when the trees are planted an as planted plan with more quality than the sketches, but which will also show where shrubs and understory are proposed and what species those are. So I think with those components, we can close out, if you will, the discussion we've been having for the last year and move into the phase of implementing the restoration plan. I think I recall Lucia saying that you had a pretty busy schedule for your agenda in March. We'll come back if you want us to, but we'd rather come back to you in April with an update on this. And frankly, right after that meeting, submit an NOI for the May meeting. So I don't know, our ask, if you will, is to move over from submittals to, I'll call it approval of what we've given you as the plan. But that's for you folks.
I don't have a problem with doing that as long as we understand that as it develops, if we got to change the plan, we can still change the plan.
Oh, of course. Well, I would imagine that there's going to be something stated in there that Commission reserves its authority to, request additional information or some.
Right.
We'll call
Okay.
it.
Mike DeRosa, how do you think, is that the way we should move forward on this?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad way to go. I mean, the commission has to make several decisions. It doesn't have to be tonight, but they need to decide whether or not they're going to let the club do the certain items under the pending management plan NOI, right? Whether it's, it's the monumentation, it's the treatment of the fairways, it's forget the other thing that they wanted to put up. But that needs to be decided. The enforcement order will need to be updated and amended again to authorize the planting of the trees, with the understanding that the understory plantings will come in on another set of plans once the trees are installed. And then the commission can vote to do that. The enforcement order is going to be in effect and running until they come in with a return to compliance letter, and that's not going to happen for 5 years. So this enforcement order is going to run for a long time, and the commission will have plenty of time to get out there and look at things and manage that.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't sure and I know Lucia has plenty to do. I didn't know if Lucia and Mike were going to come to tonight's meeting with like a draft of something. I think then, hearing where we're at, I might suggest that you continue the hearing to your March meeting, this discussion to the March meeting, and in the interim, direct, Mike and Lucia to work with us to modify and to bring to you for the March meeting a final enforcement order that incorporates the basic parts that we've talked about and authorizes the other stuff to go into the filing for the long term.
That makes sense.
Lucia's got her hand raised.
Hi, okay, I have a lot to say. Let's see if I can try to do this as organized as possible. So it sounds like you guys already verbally approved the HOP plan and you gave them verbal permission at this hearing to go forward on the HOP plan. You also gave a verbal approval to buy cluster birches that are 12 to 14 tall, 12 to 14 foot tall birch clumps And just to go back, Mike seemed concerned about the NOI, which I too would be concerned as well, Mike. So I think me and Mike DeRosa are on the same page here, and this is up to you guys to determine. So right now I'm going to reiterate what Mike DeRosa just said. The NOI, in my opinion, and I think me and Mike DeRosa agree on this, that should have the operation and maintenance plan so that it can be in perpetuity and you guys can condition that in the certificate of compliance. It sounds like the club is asking that the vernal pool, or not vernal pool, but the decommissioned irrigation pond that I think we touched on briefly about changing it into some sort of a habitat, some sort of wildlife functioning habitat. That could be part of the NOI unless you guys want to mandate it in the enforcement order. So
That
if you
would be
want
a
it done in
separate-
the enforcement order, you don't want it in the NOI.
That's a separate NOI. That would be a separate NOI by itself.
Yeah, do you want that? The question is, do you want the vernal pool rest or the decommissioned irrigation pond to be created for habitat? I can't remember what the wording was. Do you want that to be part of the enforcement order? Are you going to be okay with them holding off and filing on an NOI? And then once the NOI is filed, they have their own time to do it. We've already done an NOI with them, and we gave them a timeline, and they never came back, and it didn't, the NOI just kind of failed on us. So the next one is they are also asking that the new no disturb posts are also put off onto that NOI. So if you guys want to mandate that in the enforcement order, obviously don't put it in the NOI. Same with the filter strips. They want to hold off on that. If you guys don't want to hold off on that, don't put it in the NOI. So the NOI would be the O&M, and then whatever else. I mean, they can come to you guys with an NOI with all those things, and you can say, we're only going to accept this NOI for the O&M plan. And then to go back, really the way to lock in a delineation is to file an ANRAD, not an
No,
NOI.
it's not.
Okay, that's
Orders
the
of
way
conditions, the regulations say that orders of conditions are the mechanism.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's move on because it's already 8:30 and we still have other people after you. Barry, you don't have to be upset with me. I've
No,
just
but-
always been told it's typical that if you want to lock in a delineation, it's an ANRAD. And then you move on with that ANRAD and put it onto an NOI. And you can do it however you want to do it. So that's just the way I was taught. I know you wrote the Wetlands Protection Act, so you probably know better than me. And then to go back at that 126 meeting, we did ask for a narrative for restoration work. It was supposed to be submitted for this meeting. Did you guys submit that narrative? The narrative was supposed to explain how, when you're going to dig the holes for the trees, how if it's going to be phased, how you're going to manage the trees that are sprouting with their maintenance regimen, the pond restoration timeline, erosion controls, and you did submit us a list of species that will go on the pond. So we still need that narrative, an actual narrative. I didn't see it. Was it submitted?
I don't recall anything having to do with what you just said. I don't recall anything about any additional narrative. We gave you a narrative in response to the enforcement order. We got the comments from Mike DeRosa. We responded to those. There was no additional narrative called for.
Okay, at the January 26th meeting that was tape recorded, I can share that tape with you.
Yeah.
And
recorded
Bill Rocco, I
without-
could have
without our
sworn you
knowledge.
got Bill, you didn't agree to that? A narrative about, we talked because I said, how are you going to do work on a pond? You're just going
Well,
to.
hold on. The thing about the pond on 4, we've responded already that was an inappropriate requirement that had nothing to do with the work that was done a year ago.
No. I'm talking about this, the bank, the actual, not the decommissioned lined irrigation.
Not decommissioned.
I'm not talking about that.
decommissioned. The work on 2, we've already given you a narrative. That was in the filing that was made in November and in the response to comments from Mike. All of this is what has been already what's been submitted. This
No,
is all-
Barry, I think you're please, can I just, we actually, on 126, we talked about this, and Mike DeRosa just mentioned it as well, how you guys are going to dig in the fall. You don't want to dig in the wet season. Did we not have that conversation?
We did, but we had no conversation about any kind of additional narrative, but we're more than happy to discuss that.
It's in my notes, and I should have sent you guys my list, and I wrote down
you
narrative
should've.
for restoration work will be submitted for review at the February meeting. Example, when they will dig the holes for the trees, if the plantings will be phased, if you can or can't order the stuff all together, cut tree sprout maintenance regimen, pond restoration timeline, if
Lucia,
erosion
excuse me, Mr.
controls are
Chairman,
needed.
You're reading from notes that we've never seen.
Okay, but we
Well,
had this
you-
discussion.
Whatever, but you took your own notes. If you should have sent those to us before raising them now, if you wanted us to respond to something that you thought was being discussed. So my understanding of the meeting was those things can be worked out, but I never had any understanding from anyone requesting any additional narrative.
Okay, so my
Let me just
question is,
let me repeat something very important. The club has taken the position when you first issued an enforcement order that they were prepared to give the commission a restoration plan for planting the trees. The no disturb zone issue, the monumentation of pollinator habitat, anything having to do with the pond on the lined, it's not decommissioned, the lined pond. Those were all things that the Conservation Commission was trying to impose on the club as having nothing to do with any of the work that was done in January of 2022. And we've given you numerous filings that said those things should not be a part of this enforcement order. We want to move ahead with the tree planting and the shrub planting, and we should discuss any of the other things like what to do with the pond on 4, what to do with no disturb zones as a separate discussion. And when Mike DeRosa came on board, he said he understood and agreed with the concept of making long-term management, and no disturb zones are part of that, part of a separate activity. Number one. Number two, Lucia mentioned a recording at that meeting on the 26th. That was done without any notice to us, and we had to discover that recording sitting in the middle of the table. That aside, we have received the comments from Mike DeRosa that were dated January 31st. We got them at 4 o'clock today. Lucia's now reading notes that she had that she's saying she recalls having been discussed for things that would be filed for tonight's meeting. We're hearing about it now for the first time. Very frustrating. So if the commission wants this to move forward, we've taken the position and said, we've ordered trees, we're prepared to plant trees, we're prepared to report on the planting of trees, we're prepared to give you updated and revised figures that show you where they're planted with proposed shrubs and understory. All of that is the appropriate enforcement requirement as restoration for the issue of the trees having been cut in buffer zones and on the pond on 2 and on the 8th wetland without prior filing. But all that other stuff we've said again and again should be presented to you in a long-term management plan. That's still the club's position. And so the comment that Mike made of you need to decide if you want to move that into a separate filing, the club is saying we request that you put it in that form and that you either approve tonight or approve at the next meeting an enforcement order that puts the club on the clock for planting those 223 trees with updates, with photographs, with as-built, and a notice of intent to be filed for all that other stuff.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that. So that goes back to my concern or my question I had earlier about a notice of intent versus an enforcement order, as we discussed. So I want to defer to Mike DeRosa, his opinion on are any of those things that you just mentioned that would be pushed forward to an NOI for long-term maintenance? Are any of the items in that part of the discussion tied to the enforcement order? Or are those things outside the enforcement order? Because if they're tied to the enforcement order, they should stay in the enforcement order. But if there's some things they're outside the enforcement order, then I would defer to Mike for his suggestion that maybe the appropriate way to do that is to move that into a NOI because that's I don't want to use the word problem, That's the thing with an NOI. We have no control of when you're gonna do that kind of work. They get dragged out. We have NOIs that go on forever because you're not tied to a date certain like you are with an enforcement order. Is more do it now, get it done. And so I just want to make sure that anything that may go to a future NOI is not supposed to be part of the enforcement order.
Your order of conditions on an NOI can put deadlines in for these things, and they're enforceable. So no, we're not suggesting an NOI that's like 3 years and maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't. We're talking about doing these things on a schedule we propose in the NOI that you.
I know that, but I'm asking.
So
Mike.
if I could answer Vice Chairman Rizzo's question, Barry, for a second.
Sure.
So the enforcement, what we're discussing is that the commission vote to amend the enforcement order one more time. And in the enforcement order, that's the amended enforcement order, will be the requirement for the NOI for the long-term management plan to come in by a certain date. The club has said April for the May meeting. So that would be in there. So that's would be in the enforcement order. So they would have to comply with that. If they don't get it in by that April date, then they're in violation of the enforcement order, and then you guys can do what you want to do. But that's what we're asking. And as far as going to the technical piece of it, and Barry, I don't believe I agreed early on in this that we should move those things to an NOI. I just would say that those things are typical of a management plan. So the commission has to make the decision whether they want to keep it in the enforcement order realm or allow you to do it in the notice of intent realm. For me, I don't think it matters significantly because the enforcement order is going to be overriding all of this anyway. So, and Barry's right. There obviously are in section K is all the monitoring that needs to happen every year. The reports are to come to the commission on October 31st of each year. So the commission will be seeing the progress of the restoration each year. And there's requirements. The monitoring report shall clearly and comprehensively describe site conditions and restoration conditions, including stability, plant growth and vigor, invasive plant management, wildlife habitat, and hydrology. So they're going to have to address all those things to answer your question.
Okay. All right, does that clarify it for the commission? Are we?
Well, just through the chair briefly. All these other side things that they want to put into the notice of intent came about because of the violation that they went through, right? So I don't know why we're kind of keeping them separate now, a different track. If they didn't cut down all those trees and do all that work in the wetlands areas, we wouldn't know about these other things. So, you know, they're not, it's like, I just don't see why we should confuse the notice of intent with items that were identified through the violation.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Akins, those items were not identified through all of those things. Those were added in your enforcement order as punishment. They were not related to any activity that went on.
We became aware of them as we investigated what you did.
No, none of those things that we're talking about were related to any activity on the course. They were all put in there as, I'll call it punishment as part of the enforcement order. And we're saying, take them out of the punitive context and put them into the management context. There's nothing about the enforcement order other than the planting of 221 trees in the buffer zone, 12 in the wetland and the shrubs on the pond. The rest of it is all added on as, well, you know what, since you did this, we want you to do this, 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 and this. And the club has objected to that from square one. So I respectfully disagree that those things are related to any activity that was conducted.
Wasn't there like a
Mhm.
10-foot, signage, monuments put up
No,
as a result of your violating the wetlands? No?
No, there were none.
But the monumentation and stuff like that, please don't use the word punishment. I'm tired of hearing you say punishment. Okay?
well, my point is they're not related to any
Please,
work that was done.
so the monumentation is something, it's policy for the Concom to identify areas that people know to either stay out of, sorry, to identify areas that the layperson or the golf club or the people who manage and cut grass and rake leaves and things know where they can work, where they should stay out of, and gives to identify boundaries. It's not punishment. Please stop saying punishment.
What I'm saying, Mr. Rizzo, is that your ordinance expressly says that no disturb zones are created through an application. They're not automatically on any property. And what we've been saying from the beginning is that if the commission wants the course to create specific no disturb areas, it should be done through a filing and through a discussion of what areas are appropriate for that. Rather than, and I'm going to use the word punishment, rather than being imposed through an enforcement order, they should be developed through a filing of what can the property owner, the language of your ordinance says certain areas may be required to be designated in the buffer zones as no disturb through an application. And we're prepared to do that. What the course was not prepared to do was to have it imposed upon them as an additive to the enforcement order related to the cutting of the trees, which were primarily in buffer zones. And so it's better to, we think it's better to handle that issue in creating those and resolve those through a positive discussion in a notice of intent rather than in the heat of resolving an enforcement action relating to trees being cut in the buffer zone. And that's what I was disputing with Mr. Athis, is those things that we said in our responses going back all year long in 2022 is those things in the enforcement order, the commission said, convert the pond, the lined pond into some naturalized wildlife habitat.
No, that was suggested by you folks at the
No, what
meeting.
it would,
You brought it up about whether you're gonna keep that in service, or remove the liner and let it be an open natural space. And we said, we would support whatever you want to do there.
The enforcement order didn't say we'll support it. It said do it. We said that's something we should talk about in the future. And you took
I agree with that.
Yeah, and you took the commission took that and made it a directive to do it. And we said, no, we didn't. This is not something we proposed or planned. So
I agree with that. I agree with you.
So there were a bunch of things like that were put into the enforcement order that were directed to the club that we believe should be addressed in the broader context of course management, not in the enforcement.
Can I offer something? I would propose that for the next meeting, you come back with a list of things that you would like to see handled as a long-term management practice, and include in there whatever you want to include. And we can look at that and discuss it. Right now, we're talking about shades of gray. We think you should plant the trees. We think you should, do certain things to protect the wetland.
But we also agree that there are certain areas along the golf course that we want to make sure don't get impacted again.
Right, but that's
okay? And all I'm saying is that the best way to do that is to identify it in the field of areas to stay away from or
I'm not arguing
monumentation. And I guess what Barry's saying, and Mr. Vogel's saying it to me, how I'm reading it is that he's not so sure they want to do that. So we're not going to do it as part of enforcement order, but if we come
No,
back
no,
with a
they
notice of
want to do
intent,
it.
we would do it then.
No, let me correct you. They do want to do it. There are areas where, and we've said that in prior filings. I know there's a lot of narrative there, but we did say there are areas of the course that can be identified, and some were, I think, as no disturb. But we want to do that comprehensively, I guess, is what I'm saying.
So how do we ensure that that will get done?
It gets proposed in the notice of intent. They get identified and they get locked in with a schedule for those to be established through the order of conditions. I want to make something very clear. We don't propose an NOI to have it be vague, open-ended, and to have it expire in 3 years and say, oh, well, too bad. No, the idea is to roll these things that you imposed as directives in the enforcement order into a notice of intent, but to get them locked down with dates. Make no mistake about it. Locked down with dates, defined and definitive, areas mapped and so forth. So no,
See, Barry,
it's not like, oh, we might decide. We intend
Barry,
to do
you've
it.
got your work cut out for you.
No, I think your point is well taken, Mr. Chairman. We'll give you that list. The thing that Mike sent today is a great start for that. We wish we'd seen it before today, but we got it today. We looked at it, the thing that Mike walked through in the beginning, and we're prepared to work off of that to give you what you just asked for ahead of the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm looking for your position or your NOI, whatever you want to call it, a document from the country club. It gives us all the
what goes
buffer
in what
zones.
bucket, right?
Huh?
What goes in what bucket? You want to know what we wanted in the enforcement order and what we would propose to have moved into the NOI.
That plus when you put it in the NOI, I'd like to see a date of completion.
Oh, the NOI will have that. I'm just saying that by the next meeting, you're not going to get dates. You're just going to get the split of what goes into the NOI.
Okay, but we can by April, May. I mean, you got to start working on buffer zones at
We
some
know
point.
that. We know
So
that.
we'll
We need,
work
the
together
commission
to
needs
get
to have a date certain on the NOI, Barry, that's all. So
Well,
you can commit to the April date, that's what'll go in the amended
yeah, I
EO.
mean, we'll before the next meeting, we will
Bingo.
confirm that date will take some time, but we'll confirm that.
Okay,
And Mike, I would appreciate Mike DeRosa. I mean, I don't like fighting with Lucia over this, but I have to say that it is well established in the regulations that you can have two ways of confirming. The commission can confirm a wetland delineation in a delineation that's submitted with a notice of intent, or separately in advance of an NOI for a construction project that someone has no clue what they want to do, just to get the boundaries through an ANRAD. So that's the other mechanism, but it's not the only mechanism.
All right, so next meeting, you'll come back to us with your two different buckets.
Before the next meeting, you will have it to see before the meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we can review it.
Yeah. And if there's any response back, we're going to get it to you in plenty of time for Mike to look at it with Lucia, and we'd love to see any responses to that, certainly more quickly than the day of the meeting. We
Okay.
would appreciate that.
I mean, it just gets frustrating the day of the meeting. That's all.
Amen.
Do we have a motion to have the country club come back in writing before the next meeting with a separation of activities into two different buckets, and we'll take it up in the next meeting?
Mike, are we saying that correctly?
That was for you, Mike.
Yeah, sorry. I think the commission should do a couple things tonight. One is to authorize the club to go ahead and finish ordering those plants and make those changes to the 12-foot high clustered birches as they requested. That way, at least that is in progress for the spring planting. We don't have to revisit that. We can check that box.
Hold on, stop. Do we get a motion to do that? Let's break them into separate motions, guys, and get it done.
Yeah.
Have a motion to let have the country club continuing ordering the trees and plants they need to finish this job.
Yes, motion to continue with the order for the plantings. Plantings, am I referring to trees only, or is that just also
Trees
shrubs?
trees and the shrubs for the second.
Okay, trees and shrubs, and to accept the substitution on the birches to cluster birches? Is that on all birches or just in certain areas?
The yellow and black birches.
Yellow and black birches. Okay,
Do I hear a second?
Second it.
Roll call?
Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
yes.
Secretary Vivaldi,
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Comac,
He's not here.
You guys.
Yes.
Oh, there he is.
Commissioner Cavicchio.
Yes.
Right, the motion passed.
All right. What's the next thing we got to do, Mike?
I think vote to continue until the next meeting or the meeting after, whatever. It sounds like Lucia has a full docket for the next meeting.
Do we also want to, the hops, motion to approve? the
Oh,
hops?
approve the hops. Yes, good point.
Yes,
Okay.
And they want to incorporate my comments, so I would say incorporate the DeRosa comments as part of that.
Just to save on the number of motions, could I suggest that you include not just the hops, Mike, but the sort of stump?
The stump,
You see-
the stump grinding, cutting and grinding on the 16th, and then filling the whole seed in hay mulch.
Thank
Do
you.
I hear a motion?
Did Lucia get that?
I did.
Okay. I'll make the motion or add that to the motion.
Second?
Second.
Vote?
Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes,
Secretary Vivaldi,
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Comac,
Yes.
and Commissioner Cavicchio.
Yes.
Anything else we got to do tonight?
I would suggest that the third thing would be to move to require us to submit to you the filing that recommends where things would go and, you know, so on. And to have
Sorry,
that filed in advance of the meeting.
Somebody's got something going in the background. I can't hear you.
Yeah, there's a buzz there. You know, Mike DeRosa, you know what I'm speaking of, just sort of the thing that the chairman and I were talking about in terms of splitting into buckets, that the commission wanted a filing from us. So I guess as part of continuing it to the March meeting, and we think it should be March, because April's getting late, that we give you that filing.
Because that
Which
has
is
to be,
basically which bucket is which.
Yeah,
Right,
and sort of
on
how
there.
we would address
Yeah,
some.
just
some
bulleted
areas of
lists,
that.
right? Bulleted lists for, yeah.
through the chair, does that have to be in a motion? I mean, you're gonna do
No,
that.
I think they should just do it.
It's just
Okay.
request for information. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so just a motion to continue, right?
Yes.
A
Yep.
motion to continue.
Second?
Through the chair, before we make vote on that, I'm kind of confused. Aren't we voting also to, and I'm going by what Mr. Fogel said. Aren't we, as part of the enforcement order? I don't want to say suggesting. As part of the enforcement order, aren't we committing them to submitting the NOI?
Yeah, but that's gonna be in the next amendment to the enforcement order. So we all need to sort of, that's why we're getting that list from Barry. So that we can feel comfortable with what
Alright,
goes
so-
into
so
the
we can
NOI
amend
as
it-
part
we
of
can
the
still am-
enforcement.
We can still amend the enforcement order.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Not today.
it would
No.
be what you would be voting on as a final amendment in March, Mr. Comac.
All right.
All right.
Was there a
You have a
second?
motion, you have a motion to continue.
Move to continue.
Second? Okay.
And am I clear, you're talking about to the March 8th meeting, correct?
Right.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you very much for your attention. Sorry it took so long.
I don't have a second on that. I have author made it and seconded it. So who
I
seconded it?
second it. I second it.
Roll call, Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes?
Secretary Vivaldi,
yes,
Commissioner Athos,
Yes,
Commissioner Comac,
Yes,
and Commissioner Cavicchio.
Yes.
And so that passes 6-0. Oh, and I think Rita said Rita, you need to leave at 9 o'clock, correct?
Yeah, so this might be the natural time to go.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you, Rita.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you next month.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
good night, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda is a continued enforcement order issued to Dan Meyer Tree for the following activities: removing of living trees, grinding, grubbing stumps in buffer zones in close proximity to jurisdictional resource areas, and depositing wood chips in buffer zones in along local riverfront woods. Property is known as 133 Forest Street in Peabody, Mass.
I
What do you
move
want
to
to do? What
continue.
do you want to do with that, huh?
Move to continue.
Do we have a second?
No, oh, wait, wait.
Well,
This is Meyer.
Mrs. Susan Murphy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I am a colleague of Kate Carter's. I represent Dan Mayer and Mayor Tree. And I've been here all evening waiting for this matter to come up, and I'm prepared to discuss it. So I was hoping that's what we were going to do tonight.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much. We're here, as you know, in connection with this enforcement order. It's been discussed at prior meetings that there were not any ongoing obligations of Mr. Mayor or Mayor Tree with respect to the enforcement order. All the ongoing obligations, as you just discussed, are taking place with the country club, and all the replantings that they're going to do in connection with the property and what was removed. The issue has been addressed by the Peabody District Court. So that matter is now complete. And Attorney Carter had submitted a letter to your town council, Attorney Khan, back on February 1st. He told us that had been forwarded to the commission, and that is a request for a return to compliance because there is nothing left under the enforcement order with respect to Dan Mayer, Mayor Tree, with respect to this matter.
Before I venture down that path, I guess my question is, do we have any kind of assurance that Mayor Tree will contact the Peabody Conservation Commission before he starts cutting trees?
Well,
and not rely on the property owner?
Well, under the contracts that Mr. Mayor has with his customers,
Yeah.
the customers are required to get all permits. What he is going to do
Make sure
is particularly, I'm going to answer your question. I think it's going to be the answer you want, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
What he is going to do, particularly with respect to Peabody, is that they're aware of the tree process, the form that's on your website. There is staff in his office that actually schedules all of the jobs for whatever customers come in. They now have a big asterisk next to Peabody because now they know that there's a process, and they are going to make sure that that an owner has determined whether or not the commission has jurisdiction over the property. So, it's still his practice in every community he works in, which is in multiple states, that, the property owner is responsible for getting permits as they are for any type of project, whether it's zoning or, wetlands or Board of Health, et cetera. But they will now be very careful to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again, because they don't want something like this to happen again as
Well, we
much
don't
as you
either.
don't want it to happen again. So I
We don't-
think
we
that
don't
we're
either.
on the same page.
I mean, if the landowner does want the services of anybody, building, plumbing, there has to be a permit issued. And it's up to the homeowner to get it, but I would offer that the contractor say, give me a copy. It protects everybody. And if there is no
Right.
copy, then you've got every
Yeah.
right to say we can't do the job.
Yes, they are now, he's now aware, his staff, which is the one who schedules
Okay.
the work, is now aware of what the requirements of the city are. And you know, believe me, we've had those conversations to make sure.
All right, I
Chair?
guess I'm looking, can you send or have Dan send us a letter stating that his process has been improved and we should no longer see this happen in Peabody?
Well, I can talk to Mr. Mayor about doing that. That is
Okay.
not a requirement of the enforcement order, but
No, I
I
just
will
would like to know.
certainly
I
talk
would-
to him
I
about
would just
that.
like to see that he's acknowledging the fact that we're, we need his help to get this done.
If I could,
Otherwise, yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't vote to.
through the chair, if I could just add
Sure.
one more thing to that. And I'll take off my Conservation Commission hat, is based on the same thing, making sure you know where you're cutting trees and where you're not cutting trees, to suggest that you ask the owner, this tree that I'm cutting down, is this on your property?
Yeah.
It sounds crazy, but I had a 24-inch pine tree cut down on my land because a neighbor hired somebody to cut the tree down because they didn't want the tree there. And they cut down a tree on my property. And when I went out there, when they cut it down, I said, you just cut a tree on my property. Who gave you permission to do that? He goes, this guy here hired me to cut it down. So,
Right. Vice Chairman Rizzo, I appreciate what you're saying. I've had trees removed on properties that I've owned. And I've had neighbors cut down trees, luckily not on my property. I have not found that it's the, that's the practice in the industry. It may be something that needs to be addressed on a side. But I can reiterate that I, as his attorney and the attorney for Mayor Tree, that these conversations have been had. And so, as I said, I don't think that there's any expectation that you would have to be having this conversation again. And like I said, I don't believe Mayor Tree would like to be having this conversation with you again any more than you want to have this conversation with them.
Thank you. So can I get a motion to, is it vote them back into compliance? Is that the motion?
ask Lucia.
Yeah.
That's up to you guys.
It makes sense to me.
We need a motion.
Well, I mean, say something. We don't know if our legal representative in the city is going to pursue this or not, do we? I mean, we just.
Oh.
Yeah, we're supposed to, remember you guys were supposed to make a motion for an executive session, but
Yeah,
Salem
yeah.
Country Club's already gone, so I mean, I don't know.
Yes, you're right, Arthur.
So I know we'd like to get it over with, but we don't know what our attorney is going to advise us.
Yes. Yeah, I 100% yes. Yeah, I don't know if we can, I don't think we want to do that yet. I'm not saying we wouldn't do it. And I'm not saying that maybe by the next meeting it'll be done. But I think we still have another meeting to have. I think before would be appropriate to say that.
Right.
Mr. Chair, do you anticipate that that would happen prior to your next meeting, or has that not been scheduled?
It's up to the commission, but I would suggest that we make a motion to have another public hearing, public meeting before March 8th, and we have an executive session at that meeting. And we can get this all behind us before the next meeting. Does that make sense?
It does.
I don't think anybody, I don't think,
Yep.
you know, Barry Fogel's still there, but I don't think anybody has to be here from anybody just for us to do this.
Well, did we mess up then and not bring it up when Salem Country Club was on the agenda?
No, I don't think so.
Can we still do that?
Lucia, what do you think?
Through the chair, why do we have to, it's an executive session. Do we have to, we have to notify?
No,
Salem Country
I
Club?
don't, I don't think we
I
do.
don't think so.
I don't think we do. So I guess the answer is probably we're okay because under this item, we're just saying that maybe we don't want to note to say that they're back in compliance when in fact we still have other issues that we need to go before our city solicitor for to try to finish this up. So I guess
To continue?
I think we just have to continue this.
Mr. Chairman, can I just clarify? So if I understand correctly, the commission may try to schedule an executive session to address whatever you wish to address with your city solicitor. And then depending on the outcome of that, this will be continued till your next meeting. And then we'll know by maybe or not by your next meeting whether or not you're ready to proceed. Is that, I just want to make sure I
Yes.
understand.
I
Yes,
think that's true. That's correct.
that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
I mean,
So
Personally-
if that's okay, then we could make them, unless somebody else wants to speak on that, we could make a motion to continue this item.
Move to continue.
second? Roll call?
Second.
Okay, roll call. Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes,
Secretary Vivaldi,
yes,
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Koback.
Yes.
Okay, so the item continues 5-1 with Rita no longer in the meeting. So are you guys gonna make a motion now for a special public hearing on February 21st at 4 o'clock? For a public hearing on both Mayor Tree and Salem Country Club to go into an executive session? Or those were the dates that have been
Yeah.
reserved, and maybe I don't think Mike Vivaldi could come, Arthur cannot attend. So it would only be Chair Stewart, Mike Rizzo, and Rita said she could come, but can anyone else show up?
well, yeah, Bruce, you could come, right?
What are the dates?
The date that I reserved was February 21st. I think can't remember, it's a Tuesday. Oh, let me look at the calendar. It's a Tuesday at 4 o'clock at Wigan Auditorium.
I can do the 21st.
Yeah. What was
We
that
have a
time?
motion?
Tricia? What was the time again you said?
It was February 21st. It is a Tuesday at 4 p.m. at Wigan, Peabody City Hall in the Wigan Auditorium.
It's already on my calendar.
And if that night we don't get a quorum, then we don't have a quorum and we don't have a hearing and we don't go into an executive session.
Yeah.
Right.
So did someone want to make that motion?
Well, how many do we need for quorum?
Four.
Four.
So we already said Michael, myself, Stuart.
And Rita.
and-
But let's just say something, God forbid, happens and you guys can't, like, life happens. And, you know, if something horrible happens, you're not going to come to the meeting.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll come get you.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I'm gonna do a roll call. So that was for a special hearing on Tuesday, February 21st at Peabody City Hall in the Wigan Auditorium at 4 p.m. And the roll call is Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes.
Secretary Vivaldi,
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Comack.
Yes.
All right, so that's 5-1 with Rita not voting because she's not here. And since Barry's in the audience, maybe you guys can ask him or let him know, make sure that he heard that.
Can you not send him something in writing?
Right here.
He's there.
I heard it.
Okay.
I will do everything according to the law. I'll post it outside of City
Yeah.
Hall, I'll post it
Well-
inside of City Hall. It will be posted at the police department and will be posted on our website.
Yeah, my impression is that you're talking about a public session only for the purpose of going into executive session. So if
Correct.
it's like the last one, you know, you're doing your thing, so.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for the notice.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, I hope. Moving on to item 5, continued enforcement order issued to Alfred DeMambro, trustee of Regency Realty Trust, for work located at 11 to 13 Wallace Street. There are ongoing as well as historic violations on this property, illegal dumping, appliances, stockpiling of various items in the riverfront floodplain, the filling in of a FEMA floodplain, alteration of a riverfront without permit, and ongoing use as what appears to be a contractor's yard. Attorney Nyland is here. Last time we met, you spoke eloquently. And I have a couple of questions that I have to ask you.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I've already done my penance by sitting through the last 2.5 hours, so.
Well, that's not penance. I gotta stay here after you go. And I don't get paid.
Yeah.
You indicated that it's a contractor's yard. So the question
correct.
is, what do you mean when you say the property has been used as a contractor's yard? Specifically, what activities does that include?
So the property, good evening, Chip Nyland, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission on behalf of the Realty Trust. The property is 1.8 acres. It's zoned industrially. And since my records go back to the early 1900s, this area has been used for storing construction materials, used for staging, for a variety of projects inside Peabody, in Salem on the North Shore, going up into Merrimack Valley. And so in the beginning, it was used for certain structures in the area. The canal or river, whatever you want to say, was used to transport materials from Salem through Peabody and vice versa. It was used for staging, and up until today, it has, the same amount. We've got blocks out there, we've got sewer pipes, we've got bricks, and we've got gravel. All of that, by the way, is above the floodplain. It's closer to the parking area. But that's what a contractor's yard is. It's an area where you have equipment and materials that are used in the contracting business. Earlier, there was a perimeter it was actually a road around it that went down by the canal. That's not there anymore. So most of the activity with respect to the contractor's yard is up closer to the post office in that area, as opposed to down by the canal or river, whatever we want to call it.
Do you allow contractors, anybody to dump on the property?
No, no. Well, let me say, uh, there were some pictures that were part of the enforcement order from June of 21. And that wasn't our material. You know, we do, it is now gated. For those of you that are familiar with the property in between the library and the post office on Wallace Street. So it is gated, but you know, there are homeless tents in the back, and there are people that will dump a mattress or things that have nothing to do with the contractor that we're required to remove if the city doesn't remove it. But no, anything that's going there is from us, either ourselves or contractors with us that goes onto the property.
I mean, we've seen pictures of refrigerators being dumped on there, and I know you guys have cleaned that up, but is there anything else out there, appliances of any kind at this time?
I've been to the site 3 times, most recently this weekend, and no, I didn't see any appliances out on the property at all.
How often are construction materials or equipment removed from the property?
I would say it would depend upon the season. It could be daily, could be weekly, or could be monthly. They have contractual relations with Verizon. So when Verizon calls and said, you know, we need some help because we need you to fill potholes or sinkholes, we need paving that needs to be done, or if somebody calls and says we need you know, a sewer line and we need some piping, it really depends on when that takes place. So it's, you know, it's often, but it's, you know, I couldn't tell you that it's every day, but it's certainly an ongoing contractor's yard.
Do you need to obtain any permits for the storage or removal or placement of any of the materials or equipment?
Well, no, the way that I read the zoning, and I gave you the citation 1.5, we're called what's a pre-existing non-conforming. We have an industrial use, so we are allowed to store materials on site without a separate license from the city.
So you're saying you're not held by the rules and the law of floodplain?
Well, that wasn't a question that was posed to me, Mr. Rizzo.
That's why you're here tonight. That's why
Well,
you're here.
I'm answering the chairman's questions. If that's a separate question, I can answer that.
Where's the next
Isn't that a separate question there?
Yeah, well, I'd like to make, through the chair, I'd like to ask the question.
The next question I have is, you claim that you have an exemption from the ordinance, but do you have an exemption from 310 CMR 10? And why don't you need to meet the stormwater standards for a contractor's yard?
I'm not sure what you mean by the stormwater standards.
All that land drains into the North River. It's a natural drain.
Right.
And anything you put on the property has the possibility of contaminating the land and the river.
Correct.
And so it doesn't, my question is, do you have an exemption from 310 CMR 10?
Well, I think it's a separate question. One of the things that since I've become involved is I've looked at whether or not we need to file a SWIP with EPA for a general permit. There's a general requirement that if you have an industrial area of a certain size, then you should have an erosion control plan that is on file, and that's what we're determining whether or not we need to do that. With respect to what's taking place out on the site, we are prepared to put, and I wanted to talk to the commission about this, to put some siltation and erosion control down by the canal/river, it's pretty clear to me that this is a very stable site. The work above the floodplain. The floodplain is right around 15. It cuts through 15 and 16, but that is the area where the work is taking place is above that, so we're outside of the floodplain. But with respect to concerns about what could happen, we don't have any problem in placing some erosion controls down by the river. But if you've been out there, it's a stable area, so there's not loose dirt that's going down into the canal.
You're placing loose dirt when you dump. The dump sites we've seen of dirt, it includes in there cement block. Those are loose. They're not compacted.
And they're above the flood. They are above the floodplain.
Yeah, but as soon as the rain comes, it drains into the floodplain.
No, I was out there during the storm and I didn't see anything that was going into the river. If you have, and one of the problems I have with this enforcement order, obviously, is the lack of a specificity in terms of what you're saying I'm violating. I haven't seen any instance of anything going into the river from our property.
Through the chair, could I through the chair, could I answer that question or continue that discussion? With regard to what you're saying, there's the confusion that I have, because the floodplain for this area is elevation 15. And I have a plan in front of me for your property, and it shows me that the elevation in the canal is about 14, and that I have a plan that has contours that shows contours around 15, 16, and as you get closer to the back of the property, or to the, depending how you're looking at it, closer to City Hall, the grade goes up. So I am asking the question that if this plan says it lists the flood zone, it references the 2014 flood map, and I have a 2020 plan that shows contours that are close to the floodplain. Yet when I went out there, if the elevation of the river is around 14 and the top of the wall is maybe around 15, the elevations on the site are 3 to 5 feet higher than that. So what I'm looking at is this site, by this plan and by my observation in the field, this site's been filled about 3 feet to maybe 5 feet above the floodplain, which puts the entire site in violation. Yet, and you say you have a permit to bring fill in, and this is a section in Peabody that the flooding is so important, so sensitive, and the city has spent millions of dollars, and we've got all kinds of government assistance to help us mitigate flooding. And here's a property right in the middle of it that, from the plan I'm looking at, it looks as if there's 3 to 5 feet of fill on that property that shouldn't be there.
So
that's my question. That's my question. That's why I'm saying I think you're in violation of the floodplain.
No, I think that's fair, and I think that I'm glad that we can have that discussion. So through the chair, can I answer the question from Mr.
Sure.
Rizzo? Yeah,
Please.
So first of all, my understanding is that the elevation is at 13 with respect to the canal. Second, I'm assuming that you're looking at the ORAD. I don't have the ability to share a screen. I'm assuming you're looking at the ORAD plan that was from 2020 that established the resource areas. Is that what you're looking at, Mr. Rizzo?
I think so.
Yeah. So as you may recall, in 2020, I wasn't involved with it, but Bill Manuel and the team came to you and established where the floodplain was, and it's shown, the contours are actually shown on a plan, and as the plan that I've seen has mounds that are shown, it says construction debris on it, and it does have contours, but where it shows the 15, in terms of any fill that's taking place now or has taken place recently, that's all above, meaning towards the library, away from the river. There's no fill that's being placed below that or in the floodplain, to my knowledge. And if it is, as you suggest, 2 or 3 feet higher than the canal, then I think that we are still in the same vicinity. I don't see that area of fill that you're suggesting.
Well, we went out for a site visit last year, and we walked over there. And when you go down towards the river, you can see that the earth, the ground, immediately from the edge of the wall where the river is, it comes up about you can tell that it's been filled in, and it comes up like 3 feet. And maybe as you get closer to the back of the property, it might get and maybe more, but it's at least 3 feet, maybe I can't remember exactly, 3 to 4 feet higher than the wall of the canal. And that would put that, if I was to say that the top of the wall was elevation 15 roughly, that puts the whole site at like elevation 18. So if the floodplain was 15, and this plan from 2020 shows contours around that elevation, then something's wrong. Something's happened here. This site has been filled with 3 to 5 feet of earth at some point in time that maybe it never should have happened.
Yeah, I think you've put your finger right on the issue here, and you've seen this with the project that you had just in front of me. There are things that take place, and there are statutes that regulate activities, and there are statutes that say that if things took place before the Wetlands Protection Act of 1968, things that took place before the ordinance and whatever 1996, those things are out of bounds. They took place. That's what they become existing conditions. It's a part of the way that the regulations work. There's nothing that I see suggests that there's any fill that's taken place in the last years. Anything that's been out there has been out there since that's been a contractor's yard for a long time. There's nothing when you conducted your site visit, I'm sure you came to the same conclusion. Whatever's been out there has been out there for a long time, except for the material that's up by what I call the front of the site, where you could see the bricks and the gravel, which again is above elevation 15.
So through the chair, so you're saying that this debris, this wall of dirt and whatever debris was there before the Wetlands Protection Act came in?
It doesn't have to be
that long.
I think I'm not sure if it's that long, but certainly.
Well, you said that you have the right to do anything before the Wetlands Protection Act came into existence. So by saying that, you're claiming that all that debris and waste that's there was there since 1968.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we can do anything that we want. I'm limiting my discussion to the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Wetlands Protection Act was enacted, that was in 1968. And activities that took place before then that were in wetlands or in floodplain, those are outside of regulation in terms of that. I don't have personal knowledge that area was filled before 1968, but I can certainly tell by looking at that it's not something that took place in the last 2 years that would give you jurisdiction to tell us that we have to remove it.
Well, if it happened since 1968, we do still have jurisdiction. Now, let me ask you this. Do you have a list of contractors that you're doing business with in this contractor's yard? Are there identified companies?
It's primarily with Verizon. It was Verizon's predecessors.
They're dumping, they're putting material in that area?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't answer your question correctly. The materials from us, from our contractors, and it's used for Verizon work. Yes.
Okay. So you know who these contractors are?
Correct,
these
correct.
entities. Now, do you have cameras on your property? Because you were complaining that people were like dumping mattresses in and homeless people were occupying your property. Do you have cameras to 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 notify the police department that something's going on in your property?
We're only 1.8 acres, Mr. Athos, so we see everything that's taking place out there. You can see the tents for the homeless.
I mean,
And if
when it's
anybody
happening.
places anything there, so we don't have any cameras, but it's very easy to see anything that's placed there. As I said, it's gated now, so things that are placed there are usually placed on the street side of the gate.
So would it be advisable to put cameras there? You see someone dumping something on your property and you involve like the city departments and fire department, things like that, serious dumping. Don't you think you should stop that or prevent it if you can?
I think that's for them to decide. It happens on occasion, and it's part of being a landowner in a city. I think lots of owners have that same problem. I leave that up to them. I don't think that we take care of the material that's dumped illegally on the property.
You clean up the property if they're dumped there illegally?
Yeah, the material that you took a picture in 2021 of some materials, and that was gone probably within a couple of weeks. It was provided in 2022. So yeah, they take material that's off there. They complain to the police and they take care of it.
Now you're saying that this property is a pre-existing non-conforming use. Usually we use that term when it comes to parcels of property, whether they can be residential, whether they can be a business, whether it can be a restaurant or a cocktail lounge. So if what you're claiming is, would you be able to store like hazardous waste on your property?
Well, no. I mean, when I say it's a pre-existing non-conforming, I'm talking about it as a contractor's yard, and you can't store hazardous materials on a contractor's yard. It doesn't give you the luxury of adding to the uses or materials. You keep it. It's been a contractor's yard since the early 1900s, and it's still used as a contractor's yard.
So, what?
So at one point,
legitimate storage, contracting storage would be what? Used brick, old brick?
Sure, and any kind of brick that has utility to it. I mean, it can be used. Yeah, I mean, you've got historic structures all along the North Shore that the bricks are used in all of those for restoration purposes.
Well, eventually they'd be used for some other purpose. They'd be reused as opposed to just dumped.
Well, the purpose of anything that's placed there is for reuse. The purpose of things being placed there is not for storage, permanent or otherwise. It is for reuse. Yes.
So what happens if it doesn't get used in like 5 years? It's still, do you remove it or can it still stay there?
I think these individuals who I haven't known very long have a way of being able to use almost anything that's out there. So I think I didn't see any materials out there that would qualify something that had been there for more than 5 years. So.
Derek?
So would,
okay. Thank you.
Is there any chance that this site still came in from time to time and it was pushed around and spread and regraded from time to time over the last 9 years? Is there any chance that happened? Because it's floodplain. And if any of that work, the plan that I'm looking at that's in part of that, the documents we have in front of us, is referenced in the flood zone map that was dated in 2014. And the site is I think if the grades are correct, I could be not reading the plan right, or the plan could be wrong, but if the grades are correct, then in when this plan was created this plan was created in 2020, which is showing the site being much lower. The contours on this plan is showing the grades much lower if they are correct, which would mean to me that sometime between 2014 maybe and 2020, this site over time material was brought in and spread around little by little. And here we are 9 years later, and the site is 3 feet higher than it should be. And I'm asking that question because the plan is telling me that's what happened.
Well, I'm not sure how you come to that conclusion. FEMA they conduct a study and they determine what's the elevation of the water in a 100-year storm. Where is it going to go above the river, which you have classified, I consider to be a canal, you've considered to be a river for purposes of the Wetlands Act. So when they established that in 2014, it was set at elevation 15.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean that there's material that was added to it at the time, because there's material already on that property when it was part of the study to get to elevation 215. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the FEMA study, you'll see as a result of the buildings in Peabody that you have not one universal elevation. Like in my coastal community, I have my floodplains at elevation 10 because everything's flat. Well, in Peabody, it could go 15, 16, 17 because you've got business buildings that are acting as barriers that prevent water from being stored. So it changes. So yeah, there's nothing that changed on that property. There's nothing that suggests that there was fill that was added after the FEMA study, because the FEMA study just sets the elevation, doesn't tell you what's there.
I know, but I'm trying to say that the plan that's in front of me, that's dated June 2020, is showing the grades down around elevation 15. And what I'm saying from my observation in the site visit we did this past year, the site is 3 to 5 feet higher.
Well, that was surveyed.
Yeah, it was surveyed.
And there are stakes that are out on the property right now that show you where those elevations are. And there's nothing that suggests that it's at elevation 15, 16, 17, or 18 down at the riverbank.
Exactly. And if at the riverbank it's elevation 14 and 15
or 13
right?
or 12.
Well, I have a contour that shows 14 in the canal.
Right.
And so what I'm getting at is, when we went to the site visit, if that is where elevation 14 is down near the canal, we were standing up on land that was at least 3 feet higher. And this plan is dated 2020.
And we get a.
I can tell you that Chris they surveyed those elevations and they're on the plan, and there's no fill that's taken place since 2020 to change those elevations.
Yeah, so that's why this was brought to your attention, because I looked at something and said, wait, if the floodplain is down here, I know I'm standing 3 feet higher. Right, so this site was filled in, or material was brought to the site and graded in a flood zone. And now we have a site that is, well compacted, and there's material there. And then you folks continually come back and add more material from time to time, piles of dirt and stuff. And I'm wondering, and I asked you this question, if this is floodplain and you have a permit to operate a contractor's yard, does that permit give you the ability to bring in material into a floodplain and place it there? And then you get a big 100-year storm and you have 300, 400 yards, 500 yards of fill in there that now is going to displace water to somebody else's property. You have the right to do that?
Yeah, well, I say the answer to that is no. And I think I've answered that a couple of times this evening. And I've said to you that the elevation is 15. And I've said to you, the material that has been brought onto the site in the past years is outside. It's above elevation 15. It's not below elevation 15. It's not on the water side of elevation 15. And if you take a look at, if you say that that's been filled, for 3 feet, if you walk just from a common sense standpoint, you walk from the parking lot where the post office is, you're not walking up a hill, a 3-foot hill. It's flat. It's been flat since they started, and it's flat today. There's no hill that you have there. Anything, and the hills are to the left and down by the water, but there's no filling that's taken place in the.
Yeah, there is. If I.
That's been there forever. There's no new fill in the floodplain. We've talked about this before. If I'm in front of you for a notice of intent, the burden is on me to show that I'm not going to have an adverse impact on the environment. When there's an enforcement order, the burden is on you as the issuing authority to demonstrate how I violated the law. I don't know what the specific violation is, and I don't know what your evidence is that it is. It seems to me to be rather speculative, Mr. Chairman.
Can we, I want to change it to a action thing. Is there any way we can get a site visit and look at the property together and get someone who is, I don't care if it's Chris Mello or whoever you want to hire, to come out and take a look at what the height is? So
I think that's a great idea, and I asked Chris to put the survey stakes out there so I could see where elevation 15 was, and that's out there now.
Okay, because we can't get in there. It's gated, obviously. So we need to do a site visit with your permission.
Yeah,
it'd be good if we could do that. If we could do a site visit, it'd be great.
No one's asked that before. I think that's
well, we did have a site visit set
we
up.
did our own site visit back around the holidays
Yeah, we had a site visit set up, and nobody showed up to let us in.
Oh, well, I think that was probably before I was involved.
It was before you were involved. Yeah. And I have one more thing to add to this, and this was in the enforcement order. Evidently, there's something on the property from and I don't even know how to state this. It asks you to submit evidence to the Peabody Conservation Commission that the Mass DEP Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup has been notified or will be notified for the 120 days regarding a 21E contamination on a property. And the Peabody Conservation Commission provided a peer review report back on June 13th of 2022 to, well, it wasn't to you, but it was to another attorney and a consultant. 120 days from the above date would be October 11. The peer review report states environmental reports. The site is not listed as a disposal site by Mass DEP. However, it has a similar industrial history to the surrounding properties, including tannery operations. In addition, a subsurface investigation conducted in 2009 by AECOM indicated the presence of fill material containing arsenic, chromium, lead at concentrations in exceedance of the Mass DEP reportable concentrations. At a depth of 0 to 5 feet below the ground surface in the northern portion of the site adjacent to the North River. Several additional metals and polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, were also detected at concentrations which were below the applicable threshold in shallow soil. Polyaromatic hydrocarbons were also detected. The subsurface assessment was conducted by Weston and Sampson in 2017. And I'm not suggesting that you guys put the stuff there, but it is there. And I don't see any, you guys have to report this within 120 days of the knowledge that you got it. And I don't think you guys did.
Well, I've read that material and I have a great deal of respect for Weston and Sampson. I work with them. The MCP is a separate statute and it's a separate regulation, and it doesn't have anything to do with the Conservation Commission. So I provided a letter to you on January 5th, and you asked me to address this question, and I did address it very seriously. You know, we view that question of the MCP compliance as something that's separate and distinct from what's taking place here. If we have an obligation to report to the department under the MCP for a release that is in excess of what's reportable, then we will do that. But the cases are very clear. The Conservation Commission, when they attempt to link or to condition things having to do with hazardous waste in the MCP, they're tossed out. So, you know, we know what our obligations are. We will follow those. I think, as you're well aware, you know, the interest in this property is to develop it. And I'm not sure if that's what triggered what's taken place here, is going through that notice of intent process. But any physical work that's going to take place out there for disturbing any soil, and we're going to have to do that and do the analysis. And if there's material out there, we're going to have to clean it up and meet the requirements of the MCP. But that's not an issue for the Conservation Commission, with all due respect.
But isn't that in the purview of the waters of the United States? It's a river. It's resource area. That
Are we talking about the river, or are we talking about the land? Because I'm talking about the land. I'm not.
We're talking about pollution
river.
or contamination, and our job is to protect and help manage the waters of the United States resource area, and this is resource area. So why would you say it's out of our jurisdiction to address?
So if
the potential, the potential for something hazardous being that could get into the river.
Because that's not the way that the Wetlands Act works.
That's the wetlands.
If you have evidence, again, this is an enforcement matter. So you're alleging, you can't just allege, well, it could be, might be. You have to present evidence that what we've done is we've altered. And remember, you don't have jurisdiction over the river. It's the land under the water, right? I mean, the river is not jurisdictional. It's not, you regulate land underwater. So if the land under the water in the river is contaminated by our property, if that's what you're alleging, and you have evidence of that, then I'll address that. But that hasn't been stated in anything that I've received in your enforcement order. It's a reference to some on land, not in the water, observations.
I think our reference is floodplain. Our reference is with regard to that maybe floodplain was filled in. The fact that material may be contaminated certainly is a concern, but when we were there, we weren't there because we thought there was chemicals, and we were there because we observed fill and material that looked like it was in the floodplain. Why is this happening? Why does the ground appear higher than it should be? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about that. We're not accusing you of contamination or anything. Maybe it's just a sidebar to, it's one of those things that can happen in a site that brings a material from outside. But our enforcement order is with regard to floodplain, impacts to floodplain.
Well, I mean, you issue an enforcement order, that's a very serious offense. It's something that requires my client to have to retain counsel because you think things may have happened. You think maybe there's fill. You think maybe there's contamination.
I have a plan that tells me.
If I granted you the courtesy of, listen, if I could just answer you. You have issued a violation, and you've told us that we're violating the Wetlands Act, but you, here tonight, I asked you the question, where's the violation? And there isn't one cited. There's no fill that's taken place in the last years, and there's no evidence of contamination in land underwater. So, you know, that's not the way enforcement orders are supposed to work. I sat through 4 hours of listening to physical alterations taking place in a wetland area, and that hasn't taken place here.
Well, all I have is a plan in front of me that has a date on it. It has contours on it. And I was at that site and I could see that the grade at the canal goes up like 3 feet. Maybe I was wondering whether it was more than 3 feet, 3 feet plus from that elevation. And I have contours on the plan that shows that it's supposed to be below the floodplain. And I physically saw the earth. I can see the site is filled in. It doesn't agree with this plan. So when you say, I think, I'm not thinking, I'm looking at a plan that's telling me it is. If your plan is incorrect, that's one thing, but I got a plan that tells me that the grade is flat there and it's low and it's inside or very close to the floodplain. Yet I'm saying my observation being on site, I'm standing on dirt that's 3 feet plus higher than what this contour says it should be, if these grades are right. So we didn't do anything. We're not saying we accused you of something you didn't do. We're saying that something doesn't look right. I got a plan that tells me the grade is supposed to be one thing, and the physical earth that's on that site is, if the canal is correct, the site is 3 feet higher than it's supposed to be. That's all I'm saying. And that means this floodplain was filled in, and this plan is dated 2020. So tell me where I'm wrong now.
Mr. Chairman, I've answered that question 4 times.
Yeah.
The plan, we have the contours, and we haven't placed fill in the contours since the 2020 plan. Mr. Mello did the survey, and let's go out and take a site visit so you can take a look at the stakes instead of back and forth here.
I agree.
I think the best thing to do is let's go on site, and then we can show you exactly where those lines are. And any material that's there is not recent.
Okay. I don't disagree that the material there it's not recent. It's not a year. I agree. I could tell that the site's been compacted, but I can tell that the site's been filled. And according to this drawing, it's telling me it was filled after 2020. Or after 2016.
Can we get a site visit date set up?
Yeah.
Sure. I don't, I'd have to.
Before it snows.
I don't think, my clients are around all the time, so I don't think that'd be an issue. You want to propose a date, or how would you like to proceed?
Mike, do you have a date in mind?
I'm pretty open. I'm available tomorrow. I'm available Friday. Next week could be, I guess I'd be available Monday of next week. And
I'm good for Friday.
What, this Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could, the 10th, I'd be available to go out the other 10th on Friday.
I've got an all-day meeting that's going to last until probably 4 or 5 o'clock. So I would like to be there for it. So
I'd like you to be there too.
Yeah. How about what's next week like?
Through the chair, do you guys want to do this via email? So, because we still have one more item on the agenda.
Yeah. Why don't you let, that's a great idea. Why don't we work that out with the agent, unless you need to continue the hearing to that site visit, but I don't think you need to do that. So we'll just agree to a site visit, we'll work that out afterwards, offline.
As long as we do it 48, as long as I post it 48 hours in advance, and there's, no deliberation or whatever. I mean, I guess if I post it, we can deliberate, but then that I would just say no deliberation. It's just for, documenting and information gathering. We shouldn't be having any discussion, but it just would open it up. We had people wanting to show up when it's a public hearing, and wanting to come on the property. It would technically be a public hearing though, because it would be posted as like a site visit.
It's a site visit, it's not a public hearing.
That's fine. Yeah.
I don't think anyone from the public's gonna want to come on this property, but other hot topics people want to come on. I doubt anyone wants to come on this property. So I can send out a doodle poll, or I feel like a doodle poll might be the easiest.
That's great. That's a great idea.
Who is the engineer? Bob Langley?
You mean Chris Mello? Are you talking about Chris Mello?
No, that's your engineer. Lucia is the city engineer, Bob Langley, on this.
Is he the one that sent out the peer reviews?
Yeah,
Then it would be him.
I like him there too.
I will include him, and if he is available, he will
Because
attend.
he'll have to look at this ultimately anyway. All right, figure out a date and we'll move on.
All right, motion to continue, anyone?
I'll make
So
them move.
Mike Rizzo, Bruce seconded it.
No, I have
Second.
Mike Rizzo made it, author seconded, roll call, Chairman Lazaris,
Yes,
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes,
Secretary Vivaldi,
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Comack.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 5-1 with Rita no longer present.
And we're continuing to a date certain. Is that to the next meeting, I assume?
March 8th.
That's
March
great.
8th.
March 8th. All right. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
okay, thank you.
Let's see, the next one is certificate of compliance. Request for a partial or full certificate of compliance made by attorney Jack Kelty on DEP file 55903. The project is a commercial development which was included riverfront enhancement. The address is known as 49 Tremont Street, map 76, lot 402 in Peabody, Mass. Jack, are you here?
I am.
And I think, Lucia, isn't this the one that we said we just got the information today?
Nope.
No?
You have a letter from Mr. Langley saying that it's premature to.
That I got. And we have
Okay,
pictures.
and
we
that
have-
letter says that
not
we're not completed, and it would be error on the part of the commission to issue full certificate. I'm asking for Mr. Mello has supplied a letter that itemizes four matters that are not completed. And I'm asking for a partial certificate to allow the issuance of an occupancy permit when the building, which I believe it is now, the building is at a state where he could ask for an occupancy, and we're asking that we be issued a partial certificate of compliance, which would allow us the upcoming season to complete work, but would allow us to occupy if the building is finished.
The only thing I've seen pictures of the land recently, and it's like a bomb went off. Nothing is done. The head walls, there's like loose parts everywhere. A lot of silt fence, but
Through the chair.
yeah.
There are two orders of condition out there. If you recall, we came back, we did file a separate notice of intent for this particular Michael Bonfiglio's piece of property, and that's the property that we're asking for the partial certificate. There is a separate order, which was the original order, which was issued for the building that is under construction, operated by Apex as a gymnasium. And the front portion of the property has never been developed in accordance with any order because well, for whatever reason, but
I'm looking at pictures now of what it looks like.
um,
It, through the chair,
Yeah.
Jack, I'm, if I'm more up to try to issue partial certificates all the time, but I saw the pictures, so I didn't believe it. So I went out there and looked. I went out in person. We can't. I'm not going to vote for it. So I don't know what the other commissioners want to do, but I'm not going to vote for a partial on this at all. It's just not at a state where you could do anything. Whether whether you think it is or it isn't, that's just my opinion. And I'm more than apt to give certificates. So there's tons of work they could do right now, so they could get it into shape if they had to.
The building I'm looking at, the corner which I'm looking at, that's Bonfiglio's property, correct?
the red brick building? No,
The cement block building.
yes, that's Bonfiglio's. Yes.
Yeah, and that's not even close to anywhere. I can't see anything partial about this. It needs a lot more work. I mean, I would hate to have people going across that land with all the rocks and rubble to get into the building. I'm going to entertain a motion for a partial. Do I hear a motion for a partial certificate of compliance? Hearing none. There a motion to continue?
So moved.
Second?
Or will the applicant remove his request until a later date? Until when it's actually a reasonable time in which to issue a partial certificate?
I'd have to change the circumstance on the site and come back and renew my
Right, so
request.
more like when the time is correct, so therefore removing your request.
Well, we can vote to deny too. I mean,
I think that's probably the more, but until the applicant is ready, it seems like a situation of denial of a certificate, partial certificate.
So is it, the whole question is, it's the outside of the building that's in question. Like now, is the inside of the building's all done, I guess? But the outside.
Yeah, the inside is where is closer. Yes.
The site work is still yet so much to be done, and that's what the reason I think that my understanding of partial certificate is that the yard work, the site work has been completed, and therefore no further grading will be accomplished or will be necessary to be done. And so, that what I see is so much grading still needs to be
Yeah, and those items are referenced in the letter we got from Eastern Land Survey. It points to the issue of a couple of ret walls and some paving.
Yeah, so it's like, so you get kind of like a public safety issue too. Is like any guardrail needed anywhere?
There are no guardrails. No, there was no guardrails.
Even where the culvert is?
Called for on the plan. I would ask that the matter be continued and see what we could get done between now and the March meeting.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
motion to continue?
I think we just did, right? No. Move to continue.
Second?
Second,
Thank you.
Roll call, Chairman Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes.
Secretary Vivaldi,
yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
Commissioner Comac.
Yes.
All right, the item is continued 5-1 with Rita no longer present.
March 8th, right?
Yes.
March 8th, yeah.
Unless you guys want to, I don't know if Jack already logged off, but unless you guys
No.
want to continue it to April and give him verbal permission to have the building inspector sign off on a temporary occupancy permit, so that Mike can at least like start moving in and getting his business situated so that he's not, going to be financially burdened because of this.
Is this a business?
Yes,
or
it's a landscape
residential?
business.
Okay, so you're talking about like office hours? And no one's gonna be living there?
No, no.
Landscape business.
I don't,
Any response to Lucia's
Yeah, I
suggestion?
mean, I would support that if
The building inspector
if public
signs off.
services is comfortable, then
I think the call as to whether the site is safe enough is one for the building commissioner and public services.
yeah.
so it
So,
would be-
so Jack, what are you asking for? You're asking,
I
guess
want to
what
be able
Lucia
to
just said.
get a certificate of occupancy if we're eligible in the eyes of the building commissioner.
So would customers be coming to the location?
I don't think that's the nature of Michael's business, that he would have customers in office. He does have office space there, but I don't think he generally calls upon the customer. And if it was commercial customer, he'd travel to the site to see with the nature of the work and then enter into a contract.
So if there was a partial and he could go into the building and start doing business, what guarantee is that all the other stuff is going to be completed for a full certificate of compliance? Like what we saw in those pictures, is there any guarantee that he's going to do that?
Yeah, I would suggest yes, because he has the order. And additionally, with the non-issuance of any partial certificate or full certificate, he's not going to be able to refinance if that was an issue that he was looking at. If you're asking what's one of the external incentives, to get the job done, that's a big one.
Well,
Not to mention he's a landscaper.
right. Well, so Jack, I hate to say it because so
He's
here's my
done a
question.
nice job on the enhancement portion.
Yeah, he did.
Well,
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, Jack. Lucia, I don't know who to ask. Can we issue? I don't know the answer to this. I'm not a legal. It's not a legal thing. Can we issue so that he can get a partial certificate, and can we revoke that if it's not done by a certain date?
Well, that's what, so you guys already made the motion to continue, and my suggestion, and I'm sorry if I'm not making myself clear tonight. My suggestion was maybe continuing it until April instead to give him a little bit more time. And then I can work with the building department. We wouldn't be doing any signing off, but like pretty much like when Mike goes to want to like move in or whatever, I'm going to get notified by building, and they're going to be like, hey, can we sign off and give this guy an occupancy permit? Completely separate from our certificate of compliance. And I would say, if you guys say tonight, you would give him a 30-day temporary occupancy permit. So then he would have to keep going back to building. So that would be his incentive to come back and get a full certificate from us, so that he doesn't have to keep paying a fee for a partial occupancy permit to occupy his building, not to live there, just to occupy it and do business out of it.
So he could move in.
If you guys give the verbal okay tonight, because the way I feel is he's already done his due diligence. He's attempting to get a certificate of compliance. Other people, remember, we have other people who don't even do what Michael's doing. Michael's attempting to do, he might have come a little prematurely, but we have other people who don't have certificates of compliance and who have been occupied in buildings for like 30 years.
No, I have a soft spot in my heart for landscapers. Anyway, I think that if that's the way you should do it, that will work. I have no problem doing that. As long as he comes in and finishes, that's all.
Yeah, and if he does it, like we could, if he doesn't come in April and it's still a mess, we can issue an enforcement order. But remember, I'm pretty sure that the soccer place, like there's already like some gym jamboree, and I'm pretty sure people are already using it. It's already people on the property.
Apex, you're right.
And maybe I have brought it to the attention. I've talked, I don't know. I did talk to you, Jack, because I asked about the guy who owns the front lot. I got his information. I've already talked to Bob Danisco. He's trying to get a fence up, put erosion controls down. And then maybe we do need to, talk to public services about this requiring a guardrail. I'm actually kind of shocked that I'm just thinking of it now and someone else mentioned it. So maybe this does need a guardrail because you can go off pretty fast.
Yeah, I think
if someone comes in.
I think there should be a guardrail where the head wall is.
Yeah, that was discussed early on when we were there for the site visit because there was no guardrail. When you enter
The guardrail
property,
is going up the driveway, but there should be a guardrail that cuts across the culvert.
So if there's a suggestion to issue a partial for good for 30 days, I mean, why not just say no and let him complete what needs to be done and then be done with it? I mean, that's what Lucia just suggested.
The partial has nothing to do with the
it's not your partial. You would issue nothing. You would just allow Lucia to work with the building department if the building department was to ask if there was an objection to an occupancy.
Right. Lucia suggested we move the meeting, we continue this to April. And in April, we'll see what he's done.
That's fine. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So we're not issuing a partial.
Huh?
So
we're just going to motion to continue.
We're just continuing it.
Yeah.
To April. I'm just gonna jot. I'm
Right.
like just. I mean, maybe I don't know if we should amend it, but I think it's fine. It's a continuance to April. Everyone, if anyone's watching, they know that it's at the April meeting.
That's fine.
All right, you guys already made that motion. Do you want to go on to minutes and then we can all go to bed?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did we vote on the motion?
Thanks, Jack.
Did we vote on the motion?
No.
Yeah, Arthur, you guys already made a motion to continue to March. And then that's when I interjected and suggested continuing to April, and then me and the building department just working on their portion for their partial occupancy permit, not certificate of compliance.
Temporary.
We didn't take a vote yet on that, right?
If you want to amend that vote, no, you did not. So I'll just cross out that original vote, then no vote has been made.
Right. So we
So
should.
I want a motion to move it to April, please.
Yeah. Move to continue to April meeting.
Second.
Second.
All right, I heard Mike Rizzo first, sorry. Commissioner Lazaris,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes.
Secretary Vivaldi,
Mike, there you go.
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
Yes.
and Commissioner Comack.
Yes.
All right, so that passes 5-1 with Rita no longer in the meeting. So just to clarify, Arthur, I don't want you to think I'm doing anything like backhanded. It would only be the building department would give them a temporary, excuse me, that's it. I'm using the wrong wording. It's a temporary occupancy permit just so that he can get in, like, you know, bring whatever he needs to get in the building and start using it for his business. And I think it's every 30 days or every 60 days, and there's a fee with that. So that's his incentive. That fee, he's not going to want to keep paying $100 every 30 days. He's going to want to come back and have a nice, you know, contractor's yard, landscaper business.
Well, now I get it.
I'm not doing a really good job communicating tonight. Clearly, as you heard earlier, when Barry was yelling at
It's
me.
only 10 o'clock. I mean,
It's early.
good thing.
All
no
right.
one's pitching a no hitter.
Yes, just to say that. There goes a no hitter.
We have a,
Minutes?
we voted yes,
Yes.
moving it to April.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys already did that. That's over. What about the minutes? Approval of the
Minutes.
January 10 minutes?
Jack, thank you.
Make a motion to approve the January 10th minutes.
Second,
Second,
Excuse me, oh my God, I need to go to bed. That was approved by Mr. Vivaldi, seconded by Mr. Athos. Roll call, Chairman Lazaris,
Motion.
yes.
Fine.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Rizzo,
Yes.
Secretary Vivaldi,
Yes.
Commissioner Athos,
yes.
Commissioner Cromack.
Yes.
All right, so the minutes have been approved. Thank you, guys.
Motion to adjourn.
Well,
Raise your hand.
nice talking to you guys again.
Yeah.
Hey, raise your hand if you want to adjourn.
Wait, I don't have a motion though. No one made it.
I'll make the motion. Motion to adjourn.
Bye.
Wait, who seconded by?
What if no one seconds it? What happens?
We have to sit here all night.
Yeah, so someone please
Everybody
second it.
Here all
Everyone-
night.
Second. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
All
Good
right, the
night.
meeting adjourns at 10:18.
Chicken.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody.